stand so that we can all participate in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. We're super excited to have you all here. We're super excited to welcome the Columbia Dance Team. We are going to ask everybody now to participate in the reading of our mission and vision statement. So the mission statement is at the top of the paper. Let's begin. The mission of the Nampa School District is to ensure high levels of achievement for every student. And the vision? Every student is fully engaged in extraordinary learning experiences, preparing for a successful transition to the next stage of life. Wonderful. I will now entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We're going to move right. Aye. Thank you, Tracy. We are going to move right into our student spotlight, which is always my favorite part of the evening, with the Columbia Dance Team.
Sorry. I'm Jackie Markham. I'm the captain. I'm the captain. I'm the coach of the Columbia Wild Pride Dance Team. And this is Campbell Kirkman. She is our captain. And we just are super excited about our season. We had a wonderful season. We came away with 4 first place and then state champions in state. So that was pretty awesome. It was like the perfect day. And we just want to thank everyone for your support. Like, we couldn't do the things we do without you guys approving them, and we truly appreciate it. I can't wants to talk.
I was also just going to say 6 a.m. practices, they're hard. Our competitions this year, they were hard. Even state was tough this year. But like Jack said, we couldn't have done it with our community around us, the friends and family, and the support we get each day. And for me personally and for my team, we're grateful for this opportunity of recognition. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, trustees, do we have any questions or comments for the Columbia High School Dance Team?
I have one. 6 a.m. to what?
7.
7.
Is that every morning?
Yeah, except Wednesdays, but yeah.
Wow. And you go home and eat breakfast, or?
No, we just go to school after.
There's no gym. I mean, gyms are hard to come by, as you guys well know. So, to juggle all the different sports and activities that are going on. Dance has always just been 5:45. Usually these girls start running at about 5:45 and then practice starts at 6. So, yeah.
That's a lot of commitment.
It is. And then they go to school all day, and then some of them go to jobs, and some of them go to other sports. Some of them go to studio dance. So they truly put in a lot of work. Yep.
Yeah, I think, Madam Chair, I think it's, after they won state, and I'm always a father first, trustee second, and I do have 2 girls on the dance team. But as I watch these girls work and when they get up and the hours they put in, it's unbelievable. It really is. And I know there's some that do have jobs. I know there's one that's in the theater that was, part of the Grease. I mean, it's just amazing. So when they won state, I started to think, and I made this comment the last board meeting about how many teams in the Nampa School District from all schools are just doing exceptionally well this year. And I think it was just a great opportunity to recognize not only the Columbia Dance Team, but the basketball team, the volleyball team. I know I'm going to miss one. The ski team, the chess club, the baseball team. I mean, it was just bowling. There you go. I didn't even know they had a bowling team. Yeah. I mean, it's just really amazing. I think sometimes we forget how much these kids, I know the parents don't forget, but really forget sometimes how much these kids put in the work. And I mean, I get up at 5:45 when my girls got up to go to dance. But anyways, I mean, just congratulations to all of you girls, the work that you put in. Show your the awards, the plaque. I mean, it's just really amazing that proudly displayed at Columbia.
Can we put them on the spot a little bit? I just want to hear names and maybe like how long they've been dancing. If they'll just run through
Yes.
the mic. Yeah.
So if you're comfortable, you're gonna just come straight to the mic, and if you're so inclined to share your name, how long you've been dancing, and maybe if you plan to do something with it in the future, just come right up to the mic. And you don't have to feel compelled. If public speaking isn't your thing, it's okay. But this is a great place to start.
Unless you're one of my girls, I mean, you will be up there.
Okay, my name is Campbell Kirkman, and I'm a senior this year. I did a couple dance camps when I was like 7 years old, but my first year of high school was my sophomore year, and we'll see if dancing takes me into college or not. But thank you.
Okay, Nat.
Hi, I'm Natalie, and I've been dancing since I was 2, so about 14 years. And I've been on the team all the years of high school, and I'm planning on trying out for some college teams, but we'll see.
Awesome.
Okay. My name's Brooke. I've been dancing since I was 8, so I don't know how many years that is.
We'll go for maybe 10, 9.
Sure.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't really know what I want to do. Yeah.
I'm Rim. I've been dancing since I was 3 years old. I'm a junior now, so I started my freshman year, and I love dance a lot, but I don't think I'm gonna do it in college.
It's okay.
My name is Ashley. I'm a junior, and I started dance when I was 10, I think, so like 7 or 8 years. And I am not going to continue dance. It's just high school.
Anybody else?
My name is Sophia. Last year was my first year of dance, so I just finished my second one. And I'm very unsure of what I want to do after high school, so I'm still working on that.
I'm Katie Wine, and I've been dancing since I was 8, so 7 years, almost 8. And I probably won't dance after high school.
My name is Mia. This is actually my first year dancing, and I probably won't doing dance for college.
So it's 5:45 morning.
Mia also is in volleyball and track, so
I
she
love
has
it.
all 3
I love it.
sports now. Alicia.
My name's Alicia. I've been dancing since I was like 7 or 8, and I feel like I want to become more so of like a coach or something to help around instead of like dancing college.
Susie.
My name is Susie Keller. I think I've been dancing since I was probably around 4 or 5, but I didn't really take it seriously until like 6th grade. So I don't think I'm gonna do dance after high school, but I think I'd really like coaching.
Thanks.
My name is Kenzie Roberts, and I did a little bit of dance, but it wasn't like serious stuff until high school. That's when it was like, oh geez, I was kind of more of a theater kid. I don't think I'm gonna do much after it, but I think I'm definitely gonna try and get my future kids into it. So
That's some long-term planning.
I'm Kayla Schaefer. I've been dancing since I think about 3. I've been dancing for 10 years, and I don't think that I'm gonna do it later in life, but I'm, like Kenzie said, I'm definitely gonna make my kids do it too. My name is Addie. I've been dancing for 14, 15-ish years, and I'm definitely planning on going professional and doing college. So yeah, college first, and then maybe going professional after that, and going background dancer kind of thing.
Awesome. So cool.
My name is Avery. I've been dancing for 10 or 11 years, but this is my first year on the team. I don't really know what I'm going to do after high school, but if I can, I'd like to keep going.
My name is Abby, and I've been dancing for 12 years, and I hope I can teach and assist in dancing.
My name's Audrina. I've been dancing since I was probably 10, and I don't know what I want to do with dance yet, but I want to continue it after high school.
That's it, that's all that's here.
Okay,
We have
so-
3 others, but they're not here.
Just before you, just one more comment real quick.
Sure.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize the coaches. I know Jackie's here, but where's,
Andrea had to teach, and Mags is, had issues with her dog.
so there's two other coaches, and my gosh, the coaching staff for this team, and I mean, just watching them, unbelievable, amazing that they have lives and they have families and they have dance and they have work and I mean, anyways, I just thank you so much.
Trustee Kirsten, did you have any comments that you wanted to give, or are you good? Anything you wanted to add?
Just congratulations.
Look, Trustee
to all of
Kirsten,
you.
I'm sorry, we have a trustee online.
Hi, all you girls. Awesome what you're doing, and sounds like a fun deal. I wish I could do it. So keep on. It's awesome. Congratulations. That's it.
So, listen, I know that it's a commitment. What I think that you guys should really be proud of yourselves of is, regardless of what you want to do with dance after high school, it's the commitment that you made during. You guys are athletes through and through, and your coaches, like from choreography to 5:45 a.m. practices. I cheered at Nampa High years and years ago, and it is a commitment. Your guys' commitment to agility, commitment to training, commitment to your grades is something that you should commend yourself for and be proud of. We really appreciate you guys being here tonight, and we are really proud of the success of your team.
There was, I don't know if this is, the Idaho State High Schools Athletic, so what's it, ISH?
ISHAA.
Yeah, I think it was the first time that they had picked a dancer as athlete of the week.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and so what that shows me is that they are really looking. It's all inclusive.
It is.
It's dance.
You guys are
it's
athletes
cheer,
through and through.
It's,
Truly
it's
are.
really recognizing the work that these girls put into. So congratulations on whoever was chosen as the athlete of the week for IHS. So.
All right, so just so you guys know, from here we're going to move into our regular agenda. You guys are more than welcome to stay with us for the evening, but you guys are also free to make your exit now and will not be offended. We really appreciate you guys coming, and again, congratulations on your success. Let's give them one more round of applause. All right, next we have comments. Mr. Coffey, you are up.
All right, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. Just a few things that I wanted to share. One was just an update on the negotiations. We've had a couple of sessions since the last meeting, and what we've been talking about were some of the issues that we talked about have been prioritized by the group, and so we've been talking about them. The ones that stand out is not an accident. Support for dysregulated students has occupied a bit of our time. And so we've had great conversations, and I appreciate the interest-based bargaining process, because we do always have open and sometimes, difficult conversations. But so far we've been addressing that issue. Another issue is retention and recruiting. And to me, those really go together. And very, timely. And appreciate this ties into appreciate the job fair and the opportunity that we got to be at the job fair that NSD had, and then the video that I just watched the video that Greg or Dr. Russell and Ms. Hamlin did about all the efforts that the district is doing, and so and speeding up that process and making it kind of more urgent and more early in the season, which I feel like all of those things are going to have to be the norm, because we're all competing for the same shrinking pool of people. The legislative delay that I mentioned, to me, I just saw that we have now before the governor, the firing squad is back. And that says to me all you need to know about Idaho politics, that we have a firing squad before the governor, before we have a school budget. And the delay that this legislature has caused in terms of not giving us, even a budget, is that we can't really talk about solutions. So the issues that we talk about for dysregulated students and for retention recruiting, all are going to cost money. But we can't really talk about, money intelligibly until the budget is set. So we're still waiting. So that really kind of hamstrings us. But I'm glad that doesn't hamstring the opportunities to get out and try and recruit people. On the agenda tonight, I saw that the graduation rate is going to be discussed. There's some information. And from my perspective, and this is anecdotal, but I teach at Nampa High School, and in my experience and observation, anybody that really wants to graduate from high school in Nampa can and does. There are some exceptions. I don't mean to say that's 100% universal. There's some, but those exceptions are very small, very limited. It might require a lot of work, and I have seen some students, including the special ed department, very low IQs, all sorts of cognitive, disabilities, students with terrible home lives. It requires a tremendous amount of work, but if they put in the work, they can graduate. What is happening is that many students just don't really want to. I had a meeting before I came here with some teachers, and at a middle school, the teacher was saying that all day long she hears students in middle school talking about how they're just waiting until they can drop out. No intention of even graduating, just wait until they can drop out. Certainly in high school you hear that. I always thought it was a defense mechanism. They're failing a class or they're having a hard time, they just want to get out just to avoid. But in middle school they're talking about it. Well, the other teacher that was in this meeting with me teaches second grade. He's hearing it in second grade. The students are already talking about dropping out of school as soon as they can. And so this is a societal shift. This is not something that, that I think you all as trustees of the school district or the teachers or the administrators have created. This is a societal shift, and we are a part of society. We are not somehow in a vacuum existing, on some isolated planet. But I don't know to what extent you all can or want to accept, that society is shifting. But those are my observations. I also just had a question. I don't know if it will come up, but the graduation rate in the special ed world, we sometimes have students that have a modified graduation track. But my understanding is as soon as we do that, they automatically count as a dropout. So we're following federal law, perhaps when we're modifying the graduation requirements for them to meet their abilities, but under the state law, they're a dropout for the district. So I'm sure that has some impact. I don't know to what extent, but to me, that's an interesting issue. I was trying to think of an analogy. I've been trying to think of an analogy about teachers, because to me, the focus is so much on teachers and what teachers can do better, what administrators can do better, what the schools can do better, not acknowledging that it's actually the students that are the ones that are not actually performing or succeeding. And the best I came up with today was how terrible our medical system is. Well, more like the doctors. What terrible physicians we must have in this country. All that we know about how disease works, diet, calories, exercise, and yet obesity rates are still very high. Type 2 diabetes takes lives every year. They must be terrible, terrible doctors. Of course, we don't think that, because we understand that it's the patient that has the agency, the patient that makes the choice, the patient that does or doesn't do exercise or take care of their bodies or whatever it may be. But when it comes to education, we seem to always just focus on the teachers. And I feel like that's just missing the mark. So, thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, any questions for Mr. Coffey?
Yes, I do.
Trustee Kirkman?
So you mentioned in your comments about the societal shift, but then you asked, or you made reference to the board as, can we, or do we want to address that? What does that mean?
I think what that means is, I look at like the state level. So the state has had this go-on rate. And I think by now, the go-on rate, meaning graduate from high school and go on to college, should be at 92%. whereas before it was at 55%. So they wanted to increase it every year and get to 90%. That's kind of laughable because we're still not even at 60%. So are we still holding on to the expectation? So that, to me, that's what I mean. Like, what are you gonna, what can you do? And that's an open-ended question. I don't mean to imply anything. I mean, I'm curious if there are things that a group of trustees can do. One of them would be to accept reality and adjust your expectations.
Well, but you also used can do, but you also included want to. So that I guess was what I'm asking. Are you asking the board if they want to?
Yes, if you want to try to focus efforts on acknowledging the reality of the situation, and what I mean by that is every time I hear in every level, we have staff meetings, we have PLT meetings, we have department meetings. At every level, from admin anyway, there's this focus on what we need to do better. We have to do this. We have to do that. We're going down the highly reliable schools road now, all to talk about what we can do better. Well, if the students aren't doing better, then to what extent are we going to have any impact no matter what we do?
Oh, I agree with you there. And I do agree that there is a societal shift. And I also think that it does start at home. It does start with kids getting the support that they need or the motivation that they need to continue in school, whether that transfers into a go-on rate and they go to college, or whether they go into a vocation right after high school or whatever. But that does start. I don't think it's our teachers' responsibilities. They can help and support, but really that does start at home. It starts with that supportive family or whatever that might look like to go on. So anyways, I was just curious because you had mentioned can and want, and so I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so I guess maybe more to what it means is instead of looking for more things for teachers to do, additional testing, additional data, additional responsibilities, a new focus this year, a different focus the next year, that we accept that teachers are actually doing a pretty remarkable job. And the answer isn't to pile on more things for teachers to do.
Or whatever that might be done. Yeah, I get it. I totally agree with you on that note. Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions for Mr. Coffey?
I have a comment. Mr. Coffey, I believe that the association and the district can really work well together. I'm seeing a shift from when I started. Not that it wasn't working well together, but I just didn't see it. Okay, but I'm noticing a shift. There's a lot of things I know that are being discussed. That I know that between association and the district can be resolved without even going to this to the negotiations meeting, because I believe there's the line is opening up, and I really appreciate that. I also agree with what you said with regards to teachers. I think there's a lot of they're carrying a heavy burden, and it doesn't help that there's a lot of mental stress that the kids are experiencing, and that there's a society shift. Societal shift. And a lot of people are talking about that. I mean, it's being recognized. And it's sad because, I do believe that what Trustee Kirkman said, that it starts at home. And there's a lot of things not happening like it should be. But I do appreciate the fact that that you're representing the teachers. I'm seeing a different light with regards to the strength that we have in schools. Now, I will say one thing. To say that we cannot get better means that we've achieved perfection. I believe we can always get better, right? And I believe that even teachers, as a group, there's ways to improve whatever they're doing. I'm not saying pile on more responsibilities, but I'm saying we haven't reached the limit of greatness, right? That's all I'm saying. And I think there's got to be ways, and your conversations with the district to figure out what those areas are where we can improve and where students can actually, we can make an impact on students and maybe how we can make an impact in their homes as well. But thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Wright. Trustee Simpson or Trustee Pearson? Trustee Pearson, anything for you? No? Thank you. Mr. Coffey, thank you for taking time to explain all of your comments this evening.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, we are going to move now directly into trustee comments. We will go ahead and start far left. Trustee Valle, were there any trustee comments or updates?
I don't. Oh, I do. I do want to give a shout out to the FACE program. Cindy Cook, oh, there she is. Cindy Cook was took over time to take me over to see what we're doing with kids that are autistic. Incredible. We have some amazing teachers out there. Oh, and I think I see that actually have created their own programs. And I think they're revolutionizing the way that we treat kids with autism and kids that are in need. There's a special attention that a lot of people don't recognize. And we're actually doing it in our district in ways that I was totally blown away. And I am 1,000% in support of what they're doing because it's making a difference. It's making a difference. And I just have to put that in there.
Awesome. Trustee Simpson.
Yeah, just I just spoke to Cindy before the meeting, gonna do some visits this week since I'm on spring break, but then with negotiations and you heard a little update from Brian and you'll get more from us, but enjoying the process. You know, I think more than anything, every day I'm just amazed at the people that we have working in our district. And I just get to learn and grow from them. And selfishly, like, I love it. Like, it's awesome. And so I'm just enjoying every bit of those experiences.
Love it. Trustee Curtin?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. Hopefully they're coherent. First, I want to just congratulate staff or recognize staff in the district for the information that was shared about the bond. I think you guys really did an amazing job of reaching out to the community. Whether or not the community showed up to hear your information is a different question or topic, but you were out there. I went to a couple of them. There was just constant information that was shared and questions that were answered, the videos, all those little things. So I really appreciate the efforts that the staff did. The bond went as the community voted, and that's the way it is. So, you know, it is what it is, and that's what the board, I think, wanted, is to make sure that the community had a voice in what they wish. So, so I appreciate that. I do appreciate your comments about the teacher's responsibility. Sometimes I think that we are looking for the next best thing, whatever might come down the road or whatever program is being shopped around, and so I get it, and I know that we're always looking for what might help, and that's always the end result. Sometimes that seems to get in the way of teachers just doing what they want and need to do and why they're here, and that is just to teach. And I don't know where that balance is, because I know there's things that we have to report to the state. I know that there's assessments that have to be done, and on and on and on and on. But sometimes at the end of the day, I just think, oh my gosh, if we could just clear all this stuff out of the way and let this teacher just do what this teacher was hired to do. If someone can show me where that balance is, if they can bottle it and sell it, but they'd be a billionaire. So I do appreciate the efforts of the teachers. I've been in contact with many teachers about, personally with my kids and the other kids, and I just really am in awe at what they do. And I know that's not said enough, and I know that sometimes the teachers feel unappreciated, but it's not lost with me. I do appreciate what they do every single day.
Okay. Trustee Pearson, did you have any comments?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to comment on the curriculum committee that I was on, and just kind of give an update to the public that there was concerns that because of a subcommittee that was developed to choose the two publishers that they were considering, I was concerned that there was a violation of Code 33-118A. So because of those concerns, we decided to take a step back and reevaluate how the process to make sure we're under, Idaho law. And so we are going forward with maybe including some other publishers, since there was only two given to us to look at in the committee. So I just kind of wanted to let everybody know the update with that, and we're going to proceed with maybe some more publishers added, not that two, but okay, but that we should be able to look at all the ones that were being considered. So that was one comment I wanted to make, and then the other I was wanted to make a comment in regards to some emails we've seen regarding students not being allowed to go to the bathroom, and that's a big concern for me because as a nurse and personal experiences with not being allowed to go to the bathroom. So I made an appointment and talked with Greg about it, and told him my concerns, the health and emotional issues that it can be for children, because when you're growing up there could be all kinds of underlying medical conditions to why students may need to use the bathroom. It might seem an extreme amount, but there's underlying medical conditions, female conditions that I'm hoping that maybe we can come to some solution maybe in the future agenda of re-looking and examining the policy for the bathrooms to allow these students to, around on the whole board of with all the school district, all the schools, that the teachers have to allow these students to go to the restrooms. It's not a privilege, it's a necessity, human necessity. And I do understand and am aware that some students may abuse this, but I think that, teachers start to learn who those students are, and then maybe, we can discuss that too, how we could address that. But it's just really a big concern of mine that from the emails that I've seen, that there's parents concerned that there's only certain amount of times people can go to the students can go to the bathroom, and I just think that we need to have a set policy that you can't do that. You got to be able to let the children go to the bathroom if they ask. That's all.
Trustee Person. Okay, so my gosh, I feel like an eternity happens between each board meeting. So my goal has been, when I think of community, there's not one person who lives here that I don't think is part of our community. So as board chair, my goal has been to make sure that I'm having great follow-up conversations with our community members, meaning teachers, patrons, students, everybody. Making sure that I get our board priorities put together out in front of our trustees, working on new clarity and communication efforts just to streamline and new tools to make us more successful. So my whole goal and focus this last month is just to continue to add tools to our belt to become a more successful and cohesive board, and work on better relations in general, because I feel like that's our job. And then I also am really excited. In April, I get to tour for a full day with Cindy, all of our programs, which I think is super helpful and brings a lot of understanding. So I'm super excited for that, and just grateful for all the learning that we get to do in this position. Alrighty, if that's all, we will go ahead and move down to the consent agenda. Oh, sorry, I lied. We have one public comment. I lied. All right. Sorry guys, I didn't have the sheet. I will go ahead and call Mrs. Desiree Roberts up. Ms. Roberts, if you could just state the name and where you reside, the Nampa, Idaho.
Yes. My name is Desiree Roberts. I reside in Nampa. I am a parent and I'm a teacher here in our district. I wasn't expecting to come up so early. I was had questions about the behavior data that you guys are going to see, so I'll probably stay through that. I am here just to go over, as a parent, what is going on in our schools, and this is not just new. So I have a senior, he's about to graduate, and I have an 8th grader who will leave and go to Nampa High. Both of my boys have been in classrooms since 2nd grade for my senior and kindergarten for my 8th graders, so a significant amount of time. And they have been with more than a dysregulated student. I'm going to protect children law and FERPA by not giving you any identifiable information about said students, even as a parent. And this is, in some cases a decade ago. But we are talking about policies in our handbook that are rated extreme. And what happened with the data to proceed with these extreme students, they remained in our general ed classes for their entire primary life. So after these children have left the schools, elementary schools, I don't know where they went, obviously FERPA, and my boys have had different experiences at secondary level. Secondary looks very different from elementary, and I am not a teacher in secondary, and I'm not going to pretend to because I think those people are saints. Some people say elementary teachers are saints. I really do think secondary have such amazing skill sets that I don't have currently. But as a primary teacher, what that looks like in one extreme case, this is not a typical ADHD student, which we see more of due to different regulations of emotions that a child can have with their frontal cortex and development and the time away from school. We are talking about an extreme plus the dysregulated students that we are still seeing. And we were seeing this a decade ago. We have gone from maybe 1 to 2 students who could be extreme in a building of 500. The schools that my boys went to were Roosevelt, and we were much smaller at that time than we currently are. So we were talking maybe 1 to 4 through the entire building. Right now, and I know Roosevelt is not alone, but we are seeing 4 minimally per grade level. And I'm talking kinder through 5th. And I know some of you guys did get my email after last board meeting when Dr. Coffey did speak specifically about Roosevelt and asked what is going on. I know, Trustee Marco, you were going to come to a Roosevelt. I'm assuming, we didn't have you, so we know you guys are board members. Second, you have jobs and everything. Brooke, you have toured. Mr. Kirkman, you have also come through. Sorry, trustees. I'm saying this in complete disrespect. I'm not trying to, but the amount of dysregulated students where we're just looking at dysregulation as a child can't control an ability of that perfection of an assignment. They're thinking they're wrong, so they can't self-start. So that comes into a big emotional event, to being dysregulated over a conversation that they're not involved in with students. Obviously, we maintain classroom management very well, but we are seeing more extreme cases that take away the learning for that bigger population of students that are having to deal with this crisis student, which we all have to deal with things in our life. Yes.
I hate to stop you.
No, please.
We're over time.
Okay.
So what I will ask that you do is that if you have stuff that you would like to finish, you can email the board.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move now into our consent agenda. So I will entertain discussion or a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda?
Tracy, were you going to say something? We have an echo.
Say aye.
Say aye.
Oh, okay. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Perfect. I know, it's a lot of ayes. So the consent agenda has been approved. We'll go ahead now and move to our action items. I will go ahead and entertain a motion or discussion.
You want a presentation?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry to A. I'm sorry, we're under action item A. I want a presentation. So, Mr. Stoffer.
Madam Chair, Court staff will come up and speak with us around our playground bids.
Sorry. Courtney, I should be used to this by now. You're up.
Tracy,
Oh, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, there was something I wanted to address, and maybe it's too late on the consent agenda. It's kind of cutting in and out on the back to school plan. Is there any way I can still, or has it already been approved? I mean, I don't know. I'm sorry, I keep cutting in and out, so I can't hear everything.
Sorry.
Wow, it is really echoey. Because the motion's already been made, trustee board can superintendent and myself reach out to trustee Taylor, trustee Pearson to follow up with some of her clarification on language, and if we need to bring it back to the table, we can at another time. Would that work, trustee Pearson, since it's already been through?
That's fine. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's
All
fine.
right.
Thank you.
She could.
If
she
wants
voted
to.
on the prevailing side.
If she wants to reconsider. Tracy, you have a couple of options. Is it something that you feel comfortable just discussing with Dr. Russell and Clerk Lamont?
I think it's, that would be fine. I've talked about it a little bit with you before when we were talking about the back to school COVID guidelines, and there were some things in it when I read over it that hadn't changed. They were small, but they were some concerns I had for clarity. I don't know, I think the whole, the board needs to hear it, so I don't know if you want me to submit it to all of you and you can look at it. I don't really know how to go about this, Chrissy.
We could reconsider if the board wants to do that, to pull that item out and then have it as an action item.
Can she hear you? Trustee Pearson, can you hear Chrissy?
Is that okay?
You would need a motion to reconsider the approval of the consent agenda, and then we would need a second to move forward.
So for sake of time, let's go ahead and let her go plan A because we don't have a good connection. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and then I can email, had me email questions to Superintendent Russell, and he did provide the feedback to her. I will share all of that with the board, and then I'll also schedule a meeting to work with Tracy on that moving forward.
Madam Chair, this is also something that would be put on a future agenda.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, whenever we want to bring it back, we can bring it back. So, Trustee Pearson, did you hear all of that? It looks like we have some disconnection from your internet.
Yeah.
And so we decided plan A, and Clerk Lamont will be sharing all of those things with the board. And this is an issue at any time that you can request to have back on. So if you want to shoot that email over, if you'd like it back on next month, we can get it on.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I ask a question about, I know this has to go to the state, right?
Madam Chair and Trustee Simpson, we just need to let the state know that we review it at least twice a year.
Okay.
I don't believe there's any deadline that has to be handed in per se. We just need to acknowledge that we have reviewed it twice a year, every 6 months.
And Trustee Simpson, we've addressed this a few times, so we can bring it back whenever we like because it just is pre review.
Yeah.
All right, now we'll move into playground bids. Dr. Russell.
Madam Chair, before us is Mr. Stofford, Director of Operations. He's going to be sharing with us a little around our playground bids.
Madam Chair, Trustees, before you in your package, you have some information that is related to our last levy. We had indicated that Hawaii Elementary was in need of a new playground structure. Before you, you have the plan and the bids that we received, and ultimately through the process of selection that we bring to you one of those bids. That would be from the Garrett and Company. That was the one that went through the rubric and came out on top. We did have initially 11 companies that were interested in the project. Timing did become a factor for many of the companies as they have 6 to 8 month order timeframes for equipment. Some of them are actually longer than that, they're over a year. Through the process, we did get 2 valid bids that did come in. We took those through the entire process, and again, the Garrett and Company was the one that we proposed to you as the bid. And I do have the image that we can put up for everybody to see. It is a good model that compares a lot to some of our other ones that have been put in recently. There's 137 activities that can be done on this play structure. Also, it's equipped to handle approximately 100 students at a given time.
Is that a trampoline right there?
I saw that as well. I was wondering.
We actually were excited about that. We thought we might be able to launch some things up.
Right, I was wondering what kid wants
that
to
was
launch.
the first question that we asked of the company. Those are actually stabilizing cables. They do not move. They're not bungee cords. So it is a new feature from this particular company. We did look at that. We had the principal and his staff go over it as well. They felt very comfortable with it and actually liked what it would bring as far as options for some of our kids who had some sensory needs. It does have a little bit of movement, but it also helps some of our kids who underneath ADA might need some assistance getting into the play structure.
Madam Chair.
Trustee Kirkman.
Yeah, so I know, and I'm going to murder what this is called, but I first came across this particular playground in Pocatello. There's a playground down there. It's a city park, and I can't remember. It was built and it's named after a kid down there who had severe physical disabilities. Yeah, but there are those inclusive. I think there's one over at West Park in Nampa. Are we looking at that kind of stuff when we're putting in these new playgrounds for elementary schools?
We do. Looking at, if you can go back into the slide, if you don't mind, I can show you some of those areas. So one of the first things we do is we look at the platforms for access to getting kids onto and transferring onto the platforms. So you notice in this one in particular, there's 3 different levels of platforms. The platform addition is so that they can, the first steps are so wheelchairs can access and get up to there. The second one also has the ability to get up to that first platform as well. The idea is we move for all the ADA compliant components, and so this one does meet all those requirements, and it does have, if you look on the swing set, we did add a secondary ADA accessible swing, so there's one on the far left if you're looking at the swing set. We actually added another one in that in the process. So there'll be multiple different ADA compliant activities for kids.
Mr. Stafford, just for clarification, isn't ADA something we have to consider every single time? Yeah, I figured.
It has to meet the federal requirements for it. So they're included in this. And if you notice the slide as well, in this picture you see the one that's a little bit wider. The reason for that is that we can have, our kids can have more access to it, and it also allows somebody to help them down on the side. So there's actually the right-hand side of that slide is a little bit higher. It's kind of like a rail that people can hold on to and help them down the slides as well.
Yeah, and I understand that they have to be ADA compliant. The playground that I was referring to over in Pocatello was much more. It went far and above beyond what the ADA compliance was. I mean, it was really, I can't remember what they call those. Anyways, there's so much more accessibility for those in wheelchairs, with crutches, all that kind of stuff. And so that's really what I was getting at. The ADA, I'm completely comfortable. It's going to be ADA compliant.
And I think as we look at programs that are inside of buildings, that's probably where we could look at those types of structures there. Currently, where Owyhee does not have any of the specialized programs, we may look at that at other sites that we have identified. In future designs, we can definitely look at that.
Fully inclusive. Brooklyn's Playground, that's what it's called.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, trustees, any other questions for Mr. Stopper?
Yeah, Chairman, if I may. This is a point of information. I did meet with Mr. Stopper and discussed why I'm always questioning his bids or the process. And he went and gave me some information that I thought was very useful, especially with regards to the timelines. We're put on timelines quite a bit with regards to the building, the ordering of the product itself and to the building. And a lot of the builders don't like it, which is terrible, because I thought, everybody wants to make money. But this is a different ball of game, dealing with with the system that we have in place. So I appreciate the information that was put in there. I understood it, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, trustees, do we have any further discussion, or I'll entertain a motion at this time?
I move we accept the bid from Garrett Parks and Play for Hawaii Elementary.
A second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We will go ahead now and move to action item B for the Skyview High School data cable plant replacement. Dr. Russell?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm asking Mr. Krebs if he would kind of share some information around where we are with the Skyview data cable replacement.
Yeah, so that cable plant is 20 plus years old. It's over its warranty, and we're using E-rate.
Mr. Krebs, if you should go to the mic, you might be
Oh,
helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. I was in.
So we just, it's time for it to get replaced, and that's why you get the information you get. And I'm asking for approval. So.
Trustees, do we have any questions for Mr. Krebs?
No, 150,000 is going to be funded by the feds.
It is, right?
38-ish thousand will be our responsibility.
Correct.
Trustees, any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve for the district to engage with Ednetics to complete the work outlined in the RFP.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get a discussion on the motion. I just want to make sure, you said Ednetics, but it also includes one more vendor on there too. So I just want to be specific that if we're going to be specific about the vendor, we need to include both vendors. Right?
There's only one. The other
One's
one,
Quality Communications.
They were the other bidders.
Oh, so it's just Ednetics. Okay. Got it. Never mind. Carry on.
I saw the price of the other one.
Yeah, I saw the price of the other one too, and I was like, wait, what?
Are they bidding for the same thing as what
Was the question. $1 million versus 200,000. All right, so it's been motioned and seconded. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krebs. All right, we are going to go ahead and now move to the information items and reports. Dr. Russell?
Madam Chair, before you tonight, we are going to share some information around our state bullying report. So I have Ms. Christensen-Coons from our assessment department to come and just share this annual report, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have questions around that.
Good evening. It's good to see all of you. Thank you, trustees, for a little time to explain the state bullying report. This is a separate report from many other things that we do because we have special requests. If you had a chance to look at IDAPA code and the state statute that I included in with this document, it is an area where they ask us to actually pull out and report our data in an aggregate fashion separate from everything else that we submit throughout the year. So it's one of the few things that we do not do an IC submission for. We actually have to do a separate report to the state Department of Education under the approval of state board. And so all the requirements of what that bullying initiative looks like and what that communication looks like are outlined in that statute in IDAPA code. Glad to answer questions for it, but you also approved a lot of the language and information included in there with your handbooks when you did the handbook submission earlier in the school year. I am hoping that Tyler is going to bring that presentation up for us here to look at just a few things. We wanted to help you see, and we have to report this each December. It's due to the state, and then usually right around this time of year, you start to see some reports come out from different reporters and news agencies. And we haven't seen that yet this year, but I thought you might like to have a heads up of what we reported for the Nampa School District for last school year, that 21-22 school year. it was a really different year for us because the year before had been really COVID impacted, and so we had numbers that are not representative of what we typically see in this for this report. But so we did see a huge increase from the year before. That little gray line at the very bottom is that 2021 school year line, and so we were right back up where we had been pre-COVID in our report information. And so you'll see that while we had that increase of 115 incidents compared to the year before, it did kind of balance out and was still a little bit lower than where we had been in 1819 and 1920 for those incidents. As we look at the grade level information, you can kind of see on that graph just that comparison to where we have been the last few years compared to this year. We did see an increase in our freshman class in the number of incidents, but the others kind of balanced out between the previous year's results, especially if you don't get too focused on that 2021 school year where we had so few incidents to report. If you want to go to the next page there, Tyler, please and thank you. Fantastic, thanks. We also want to look at the male-female. You may wonder why this is such an important report, or why we focus so much on the gender. It's actually the only breakout they ask us to do besides grade level is male-female. And they want to see if there's repeat offenders or just a first-time incident of bullying is how they have us complete that aggregate report to the state. And so you can kind of see that comparison of male-female and where we fall on each of those pieces and kind of, again, averaging back out to where we were before COVID, but still less incidents than we had seen pre-COVID. Hopefully those graphics were pretty self-explanatory. And then the last page of this packet, I just wanted to make sure you saw, because this is actually what we submit to the state. They just want this one report at the in December for the year before that just breaks that up by male, female, and really looks at, are there any second or additional offenses? So does one kid have a second offense of bullying or repeated offenses of bullying? And so this is, again, just the number of incidents by grade, and this is all that the state asks us to report separate from everything else that we do and when we make this submission. And I'm glad to answer any questions you have about our annual bullying report.
Perfect. So, Mrs. Christensen, before I open this up, I want to apologize. I sent you my questions earlier and I titled them bullying data report and they were for the behavior data report. But it's because I was doing this and this at the office. So I'll go ahead and just read those questions when we get there. But I just wanted to let you know that I had made that flight. And once I realized what I did, I thought to myself, my fault. So thank you so much for answering those questions and not calling me crazy in the process.
It's okay. I just thought, I need to make sure you see the IDAPA code and the state statute. It's a very unique thing that we go
Yeah, I know. It was so good. And I thought to myself, she's so good. So first of all, thank you. And then on that note, trustees, do we have any questions?
Can I have a question?
Sure.
So looking at third and fourth grade, if you go back up to, sorry, Tyler, I don't know if you still have that up there. Pull that up. Third grade, 43 incidences in 2018-19. Fourth grade, 38. Of course, 19 and 20, 2021, you know. But why such a significant drop in those two grades, particularly from 43 to 6 and 38 to 6? What's going on there? It's a good thing. And so I was wondering, do you have a little bit of analysis for those? And can we duplicate that and continue to do those? That's what I'm getting at.
I wish it was that easy to look at that. One of the tough things about this report is we ask administrators to do those reports and aggregate that information, so we don't actually get the individual names of those kids because that's the whole part of the state reporting is removing that component. I will say that we've had some successful interventions with some of our amazing elementary counselors in some of those areas, and then we've also had some kids that have left our district, and so that helps our members a little bit.
So the attrition has a hand in it a little bit.
It does have a little hand in it.
That's a significant drop, though, from 43 to 6 and from 38 to 6. And others, kind of stay the same up and down a little bit. But
Madam Chair, Trustee Kirkman, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the behavior as well, because it does tie into behaviors, bullying and whatnot. In the 18-19 school year, we had really started some work in the elementaries around morning meetings, building stronger communities in the schools, and obviously COVID was kind of difficult to do that, but it's become a more common practice. I think that was one of the things. The staff is trained every year on bullying, what bullying looks like, how to recognize bullying, how to report bullying, and so that might play into a little bit, at least our staff being more aware and addressing it immediately. So it's not just a boys will be boys or girls will be girls kind of comment. We're getting that kind of thing. So and just some other things around kindness, friendship. We've done some work as a district around kindness weeks and some of that stuff. So all of those may play into it, but it is a pretty significant drop. Hopefully it stays that way. But it is kind of hard to pinpoint any one thing.
Well, it's hard to see a trend when you got the COVID years in there too. So maybe next year or the year after we'll start to see a trend. Hopefully it stays the same. Thanks.
Trustees, any other questions regarding the state bullying data report? Trustee Pearson, did we lose her altogether? Oh, good. Trustee Pearson, did you have any questions? No? Okay, perfect. All right, we'll go ahead and move to B. Dr. Russell?
Madam Chair, Trustees, before you tonight, I'm going to have our Director of Elementary Education, Ms. Mon, and Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Yarbrough, come forward to speak with you around our behavior data. This is something that was brought forth to the board through some comments that was brought by our association, and there was some discussion we had at our last board meeting about wanting to learn a little more. So this evening, what we'll share with you is some information about what we're seeing, and we try to bring forward some data around that. It may not be every ounce of data that we have possible, but at least just kind of give us an idea of what we're seeing. There are some things that we want to tighten up in our data, particularly in our elementary schools. We're going to need to do some work on that and might share that information. And then we also want to talk through a little bit about what we're doing to support schools right now currently, and then looking forward, what are some things that we might need to do as a district to try to support schools. So I'm going to turn it over to these two, and they'll share some information that we ask your questions.
Madam Chair, Trustees, thanks for the opportunity tonight. Tyler, will you pull up the slideshow for us? Ms. Bond and I will kind of pair back and forth. I'm taking the secondary pieces with Mr. Labu being out, so any other questions though I can answer on the backside with Dr. Russell, so any questions you have around.
Sounds good. And what I'll do is go ahead and read this question since they were sent from person for then if needs be, you can email those answers and they can be shared. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so the overall student behaviors, again, looking at what we were asked to look at, and this is for the 2022-2023 school year. So we're going to look at some current data, what are we doing, and then future challenges, much like Dr. Russell said. Tyler, next slide, please. Right here, we have the overall district data going back to the 18-19 school year. Now, this is around our risk and threat assessment. So I want to be really clear what a risk and threat assessment is. This is a situation when a student has made a specific threat or an overt threat to another student and or themselves. This is not a suicide screener. These are different, and we plan on discussing those issues next month with mental health. So I want to make clear that this is risk to someone at school or something around that kid has made a specific threat.
Including staff?
Including staff, correct. Yep. So if we look this data from 18-19 down through 21-22, those are the total year numbers of risk and threat assessments that our district level RTAT team ran for the entire school year of those preceding 4 years. To date this year, you can see we have a significant increase from the 2022-23 school year to, and I believe this date was as of the very end of February, we are at 133 total risk and threat assessments. The graph just next to that actually also is very, very telling in looking at what is happening there. You're actually seeing a small decrease in the total number. Now, again, if that extrapolates out to the year, probably middle school and high school will be around the same. Looks like high school is a little bit elevated, but the particular notice is K-5. And we're seeing a ton of significant behaviors and risk behaviors or threats that are happening within the elementary that we're dealing with. So just to get a scope of what we're dealing with as a district, you can see the extreme increase in grades K-5. The 6-8 we anticipate probably by the end of the year being about level and maybe a bit elevated in the grades 9 through 12 when you extrapolate that over from the beginning of March through the end of the school year. Any questions on that slide and the data presented there?
Trustees, any questions?
Is there schools that are having more problems than others?
So it's a little bit difficult to quantify from this perspective, Trustee Baye, is like Dr. Russell said, in some of our systems, at the elementary level particularly, how we're identifying some of those things how we're identifying some major behaviors or some minor behaviors using PBIS as a framework causes a little bit different like trigger of what is that thing. And when we come to risk and threat, I can't get down into the in-school data, but what I can tell you is elementary is seeing much more of that. That's the level that we create. Elementary is having much more of an issue than our middle or high schools levels are having at this current time. Again, one of the challenges is, again, in our elementaries, using PBIS and how we have gathered behavior data from that 19 school year through now. We've used some different systems, including Swiss, which is a behavior tracking data system. We've used PowerSchool and all of those pieces. When we get down to RTETs by school, I can get that specific information if you would need. But we can get down into that again. Elementaries are much higher than they've been.
Yeah, for me, it would be very beneficial to have that information. We can see what some schools may be doing different than other schools.
Very, very good question. To go along with that, I was part of a meeting today that, again, the whole picture of this comes down a few slides later. One of the things that we were doing is creating behavior response teams in each of the elementaries and having some district level support, working with buildings to do just exactly that, to maybe look at our schools that aren't experiencing as many of these types of significant risk and threat, and then helping schools that may be seeing a rise in that or an increase out of nowhere. The conversation with that, though, is, again, it depends on the students we have coming in and what they may have. For instance, this year, sometimes right off the bat, we get a risk and threat from a student transferring in from another district because the file that comes in shows a significant reason why that student left another district, came to ours, and we start off with that because of information we have in the file that's immediate. Something happened 6 months ago or a year ago in that student's file, but something is the reason they left that previous district, and that's caused some of our numbers to be a little bit tricky there.
Madam Chair, if I may, just this may help answer Trustee Baye's question. Trustee Baye, historically, we have seen some of these behaviors for numerous years in some of our high poverty schools and some of those elementary schools. But I think what's different this year is we're starting to see that throughout every school. I think that's some of the comments you heard from some of our public comments this evening. We do, I think, for the first time, though, because we're seeing such frequency, that elementaries need to get stronger on how to collect that data and report that data out so that we can make those data-driven decisions. That's part of being a highly reliable system. It goes back into a highly reliable area 1 point, our first point, actually is one of our responsibilities to do that. So working with Ms. Mon and her team to kind of help develop some clarity around that, because we need to have good data so we make good decisions and where we put resources and things like that. So it is something we need to improve upon.
Trustees, any other questions before I ask mine? Okay, so again, I really apologize that I sent this email to Greg so that it went to Anita, but my questions were around this. So here, I wanted to understand the levels of behaviors from elementary to secondary, because when I read the data, it's just 133 incidences, correct? And I don't know, and this just comes from all the meetings that I've been having to do on the back end recently because of the dysregulated students and the meetings with Dr. Russell. And so from my understanding, that 133 is total, but it doesn't necessarily give me the level of what that classification of the behavior would be, right? Is it a total number?
So
again, reminding, I said this for bullying.
Yes.
So, okay.
When we get to risk and threat, yes, it does give you an idea. A risk and threat isn't done for something that's a run-of-the-mill behavior.
So the risk and threat is those 133 extremes.
Correct.
So these are going to be our
threats.
extreme threatening behaviors. So this is going to be in comparison. And how would I, what level is this? Or how would we?
What level of behavior or what level of threat?
What is extreme?
So
yeah,
here's
what
what
is
happens.
extreme? Yeah, I'm trying to determine how
It's a great
do I,
question.
yeah.
It's a great question. And actually, that is why we have the RTAT process in place, is to determine that. Because what happens at a risk
Tell
and
me
threat
what you said
assessment,
for process one more time.
RTAT, risk and threat assessment,
Give me the abbreviation.
RTAT.
RTAT?
Yep.
Okay.
It's our
Stop,
district
that way I
RTAT.
know whenever you say it.
So within that, what happens when our district team runs a risk and threat assessment, and Ms. Christensen, if I may speak, please jump in. What happens when we run a district risk and threat assessment, there is going to be one of three outcomes in how that threat is defined. So that threat could be, I'm going to bring a gun to school. That threat could be, I'm going to kill Mr. Kirkman because I hate his fourth hour. That threat could be, I'm going to beat so-and-so up at the bus stop and I've got a knife with me.
So we've determined in these 133 that we have an extreme and a valid risk and threat.
we have a threat that is there, and then we take that through the risk and threat process.
Okay.
So that threat happens, and then within the risk and threat process, that what our team does, they go through to determine how valid is this threat, how dangerous is this threat, how credible is this threat, and it goes from a low to a medium to a high risk threat, and those are the things that we see. So again, the idea of getting to a risk and threat, there has been a threat that has been made, and it is significant. We don't do the thing with the kindergartner that has said for 5 days. We might run an initial, I was going to kill my teacher, but then they say that 2 or 3 times. After we've determined what that threat is, that's where our professionals get into understanding how to navigate that child, if that makes sense to you.
I'm working on it making sense. What I want to make sure is that my complete understanding is that 133 have gone through the process and all been found valid. Or is that the 133 times you had to do it and maybe 75 were determined to be actual threats and maybe one kindergartner was having a crazy day, so he was going to kill the teacher, right? That I just am trying to determine so that I am properly reading the data that I'm getting.
So just to be clear, this is 133, and every year that you have recorded is what is sent to us as they started the threat assessment process. It may be that it's just the initial screener portion because a threat has been made or a weapon has been brought. So we have to initiate that threat assessment process at the building level, and every building has their own risk and threat assessment team that initiates the process. Sometimes it's just a screener, right? It's that kindergartner that had an unfortunate day, but they have to make sure that they're looking at all the questions and seeing if there's.
So what I hear you saying is if there's a threat, regardless of if we're sure that it's valid or not, we are going to approach it like it is until we determine that there is no risk or threat. And that's how I'm looking at this data. So 133 times, which by no means am I saying is not egregious. I want to have a complete understanding of the process so that when I'm reading the data, I know what I'm reading here.
And again, we're really cautious about determining threat level. We want it because it's so many components and pieces. And so, and again, a team of very smart professionals have come together to look at that. And so we want to be cautious when we assign the threat level, right? What we want to do is what risk is there, right? And then really look at all the components. We do a really thorough process that is highly lauded by a lot of other districts. They like to take our stuff and use it. And so
you guys are going to go through that process and you're going to do, so what I hear is that you guys have gone through that process already 133 times. And that after that process is completed, then you guys are going to determine the level. These questions would have made so much more sense of the behavior. So anyway, but thank you. Sorry, Trustee Kirkman.
First, I'm a little bit unnerved because in Mr. Yarborough's 3 examples, he only named one person, and that was me.
That's because you have the teacher error.
But so who's part of this risk and threat assessment team?
So as Ms. Christensen just described, at the school level, there's an administrator and the mental health professional, either social worker or counselor, that does that initial screener. And then that goes to a district level team if it is determined that we need to proceed further.
At any time, law enforcement, school resource officer,
School resource officer is always included and notified when a threat is made. And the team actually determines based off that screener if they're going to do a full threat assessment. And that's a very comprehensive process. And again, SRO is included from the beginning. And then that team actually goes through and starts to initiate that thorough threat assessment process. And then if needed, we have a team of mental health professionals, so school social workers, psychologists, and counselors who serve on the district team and have gone to a lot of trainings and research, and then we help dispatch those to support if needed. But then we review every single threat assessment that comes through, whether it's a screener or a full process. That district team reviews those each month and goes into looking at all of the response management and support plans and components for that.
Okay. And I'm going to just stop everybody for a second. Trustee Pearson has some questions or comments, so we'll go ahead and go to the screen.
Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just a quick clarification. So the, for instance, these numbers, the one for the 133, those, it's 133 students went through the risk and threat assessment. Is that what that 133 means? Or is that once they go through the assessment, then you make a determination of what? of what? So the 133 are the ones who just went through the assessment and then maybe continued on with their procedure after that, or a suspension, or?
So that 133 students, they made a threat of some kind or brought a weapon of deadly harm to campus. Those really are the pieces to that. And so those 133 students did those things and then went through the process. Every one of our students that goes through, even if just a screener is completed, it is very important that we do a thorough response management and support plan to wrap services around that kid. And that's where all those mental health professionals become super important, because they look through and they say, what supports do we need to put in place? The consequences, I mean, there are often consequences associated with that as well. And that is always included in that risk and threat assessment. But again, we're focusing on what supports are we putting in place to make sure that that student is not a danger to themselves or others on that campus. And so every time, even if it's a screener, that plan may not be as comprehensive as a kid who's gone through the full threat assessment process. But every time we write a response management support plan. So that's 133 times, because some of these are on a second or third offense. So I don't want to mislead you that it's 133 students, but it's not as common to have a second and third as it is to have that initial threat assessment. But every one of those has had a response management and support plan written on top of either that screener and or full threat assessment process.
So that number 133 could be the same student more than once?
It's just a handful of times that are both are repeat offenders in the same school.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Trustee Pearson, any other questions, trustees, around this slide? Because there's more slides. Okay. I have more questions as well.
Go ahead. I'm done.
Well, Madam Chair, I think it's important to get a little bit of an understanding of, if possible, why so many this school year and not another. Maybe you'll cover this later on. I don't know, but that's huge. I mean, that's almost shocking if you look at 97, 93, 35. We know why. At 94, and then 133, and we're not even finished with the school year yet. So and then especially to see K through 5. I think the question on everyone's mind, the elephant in the room, is what's causing this?
Madam Chair, Trustee Kirkman, great question. And when we saw the data, we asked the similar question to that. Why such the uptick this year? A couple of theories, and I don't know if we have a perfect answer for it. One of the theories is, are we more consistent? Are we more knowledgeable about how to do a risk and threat? In the past, did we miss some maybe that we should have performed stuff? And maybe that is some of the data, but that could be one of the things. The other one is, I think it's the effect of what we saw through students in the pandemic and the dysregulation that we've heard so much about, particularly at the elementary level. Many of those students now, when they're at home or in our system, we think that it helped with some of the severe levels of behaviors that we've had. We've always had students with behaviors, but now they're more common, they're more across the board, they're at every school. I think, again, going back to what Ms. Roberts mentioned in the public comments, at a school like Roosevelt, in the past, there was 1 to 4 in a school. Now there's 3 or 4 per grade level. So it's just a frequency. These guys may have other thoughts around it, but those are the things that I've wrapped my head around about why we're seeing it. It is alarming to see that number, because when you think exactly what you mentioned, in my head, I thought, well, we still have all of March, we still have all of April, we still have all of May, because this is from February. And I broke it down. I think we were looking at 160 probably for the end of the year, which is almost double what we've had previously.
So I think probably now I'll just go ahead and get those other 2 questions so that you guys have them. So the other 2 things that I had requested were our suspension data, so ISS and then suspension, and that data was shared with me. So the clarity here is that these aren't necessarily things that would have just resulted in suspension, because just last year, because they were able to pull me the 21-22 data, we had 214 children suspended for just fighting. We had 145 children suspended for tobacco and vaping. We had 125 children suspended for aggression, 77 for insubordination. So I had asked those 2 questions, which I can gladly share, and Anita was so gracious to pull that for me. So I had pulled that data. So I only felt it pertinent to understand what I am starting to understand is that these are egregious behaviors that may not even be considered in the behaviors that we're seeing. These may be over and above and beyond that. Right. And then my last question was just data on the logged entries for extreme behaviors or where we had to follow the handbook so that we could have more clarity to bring more data. So those were my 4 questions, which Anita was so good to me and provided all that information. So I just wanted to bring clarity that this is above and beyond even sometimes what we're seeing. So these are truly extreme cases.
Correct. There are 2 ways in Power School in general across our system that we do document behaviors or anything. Log entries are one way that we do something, and a teacher might put a log entry in for something that is a lower level behavior. There is no follow-up discipline. Incidents, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Coons, that's where you pulled the suspension data from. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually.
Yep. As you can tell, she's our guru with numbers.
Anita, I felt like I got to the right person regardless.
Really, that's just looking at secondary data.
Yeah, that's just secondary.
And we end up actually having to pull from log entries and instance because our secondary schools are amazing with attendance, and our attendance secretaries are right on ISS, OSS, and so that represents that ISS in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension data. And so we're able to pair that back, and sometimes it isn't an incident, but we can find the log entry that resulted in that suspension, and so that's why you only have last year's access, because that's a very lengthy report.
Well, but it was just so eye-opening because when you did pull it, the 21 to 22 for high school number of suspensions, so everybody's clear, was 736.
And that's a half day or more. That's the only. So if it was just a class period, it doesn't hit that threshold. We only report half day or more because that's what our safe and drug-free school reporting includes.
To provide context on that, though, I would suggest take the number of high school students you have and the number of school days they have possible, and you had 715 out of the tens of thousands of possibilities. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
I don't mean to disregard. I mean, ISS school suspension. I think that the goal here is that we're seeing those extreme behaviors, and I think that sometimes, especially myself, when I hear extreme behavior, it's hard for, for teenagers, sometimes it feels very extreme. I'm like, this is so extreme. And so really my questions were more around, with all the meetings that we're having, is I think that what we're hearing is that these are serious and extreme behaviors. And like Trustee Kirk's been saying, when we see it K through 5, I just think that we need to have an understanding of what's being said just from for our perspective, so that we can have a really good understanding when you're providing us data. It's that piece that we're looking at because we're dealing with those extreme behaviors, but to see that those are kind of above and beyond. These are the 133 times that you're pulling that out of, the 1,200, which is still, yes, out of the tens and thousands, it's still a small number, but I just think it was to understand the extreme of what you guys were showing us.
Thank you. Next, any questions on the rest of this slide? The next one is actually really foundational with the link between workers' comp injuries for staff and those that have been done by students. So there's 2 pieces here. There's 2 years of data, the 21-22 school year, the 22-23 school year. That first first graph, 112 total claims, 44 student involved, and 6 had been seen by occupational med. So the group that we work with for our folks being seen by that. This year alone, you can see again 63 and then 16. Now, underneath that, it breaks that number of 44 and 63 on those 2 years, corresponding to elementary, middle, and high school. So again, you can see that the vast number of staff injuries are coming as well from the elementary. And those things we tend to see not as violent of behaviors towards staff in the secondary schools. We really don't, as what we see with, again, those extreme kind of volatile behaviors in the elementary. And so those numbers are just to show that link again between how it's impacting our staff as well, and how that's something we definitely need to address and understand.
Sorry, trustees, any questions?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a question. So, not to the comparison, have we looked at what these numbers look like in comparison to other school districts around the state and even around the country? Because a lot of times we hear, well, this is what's going on all over the place, and sometimes, and that sometimes is kind of a dismissive tone, and I don't want it to be that way because this is serious. But really, how's it look around the state?
There is one more layer here too, Trustee Turkman, before I answer that question. This is all students, and we do have some students with significant needs that fall into that category as well. So there is sometimes some inherent, there's a higher risk in serving some of those needs and some of the things that can happen. So I want to preface it there. We have not, Gwen Hamlin, our HR director, pulled these numbers for us. I can definitely follow up on that and get you numbers from around other districts around the state, but I don't, we hadn't looked at that level yet, but we can definitely follow up on that.
Madam Chair, Trustee Kirkman, absolutely will try to do that, try to reach out to some surrounding districts. Anecdotally, just talking to other superintendents around the valley, they did say they've seen a rise. That was in West Ada, that was in Boise, Kuna, Mountain View, just some of those superintendents have, but I don't actually have hard numbers, and so it'd be helpful to get some.
And whether or not they mirror the K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12 numbers that we're seeing here. I'm not looking for excuses, but I think it would be interesting to see if this is, and then I guess as a state, what are we doing about it? That's just a pie in the sky question.
Chairman,
Yes, Trustee Valle.
I'm just wondering if we're tracking the cost to the district. Those numbers. I mean, what is it costing us monetarily, time-wise? What is the cost? And if it's not being tracked, we need to measure that too. I mean, that's part of understanding the whole picture. And I don't love this, by the way, but I love that data that you're giving us, but I don't love the numbers. And I'm sure you don't either. But it's understandable why teachers are complaining, right? But we do need a little more digging into it so we can understand it better.
Trustee Valle, point of clarification, are you wanting to know what the cost is for our workman's comp or even the man hours around possibly going through mitigating claims?
Both.
Both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, it would be interesting, Chair Taylor, to see how many days on a workman's comp claim on average is that teacher out of the classroom? Because obviously it's a domino effect with substitutes and so on and so on. Plus learning that's going on, or lost learnings.
Yeah, there's the financial cost and the academic cost, and yeah, it's significant.
But more importantly, there's the cost of the students.
Correct.
Correct. The human cost.
Sorry, can we go to the next slide? Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Mon. She's going to get into a little more of the specifics of the elementary data. Now, these are, I think they may be related to RTAT, may not be, depending on what they are, correct?
This is elementary school data, right? Okay, not just elementary data.
Right. So we have 14 elementaries that we pulled data from. This does not include like ANOVA, and it does not include gateways. Major behavior incidents by March, and behaviors you'll see we have listed below, things like harassment, physical aggression, things that Trustee Taylor had talked about, disruption, avoidance behavior, so running off campus, those kind of things. Possession of alcohol, drugs, or weapons. We have had several cases of vaping at the elementary. We have had some weapons, theft, vandalism, verbal aggression, defiance, and some other various behaviors that are extreme.
And Ms. Vaughn, these do or do not include RTAT numbers? The 133?
They will also include.
Okay, it's all
so
together.
we'll pull the RTAT out
of this.
that. Mm-hmm.
But it still includes it in this number, but RTAT has been pulled.
Right.
Okay.
I do want to be really clear that in elementary, each school has been using different ways to track that data. And so one of the things that we need to do is get really clear on what constitutes a major behavior as uniform across so that we can really talk clearly about that. But these were identified by the school as major disruptive behaviors.
Madam Chair, Ms. Mon, could you just clarify why have elementary schools used different ones and maybe how that some schools have used it to help their multi-tier support systems?
Right. So we have schools moving into, wanting to look at data so they can sit down as a team and look at where are behaviors happening, what kind of behaviors are we seeing, what can we do as a school to tighten those things up. And those things have been done at the building level. There have been a couple of data systems that help us do that.
Is this part only for my understanding, is this related to HRS work as well? Isn't this part of that framework a little bit as far as the data collection?
Yes.
This is going to feed into HRS.
Yeah.
Yes, would be something we would do anyway. Multi-tiers and systems of support will be something we do in general anyway. And yes, we can use it. We can use HRS to help get more focused and get that even better.
So let me explain the tier system
Yeah.
a little bit for you.
Sorry.
So in tier 1, that's behavior that we want to teach across the board. So everyone in the school will know how to walk down the hallway. They will know what respect looks like in the classroom, and those things will be uniform inside the school. So we're using the same language with the same kids every day. What it looks like in the lunchroom. So we're teaching those behaviors across the board. So that's tier 1. We all get that. We all get training. We all know and understand what those behaviors are expected. Some kids struggle with that. Some kids will need a little extra support. Maybe they need to go to the counselor for a little help learning how to deal with peer conflict. Or maybe they need to check in and out every day because they just need that extra validation that they're doing well. Some kids, what we call tier 3, are those kids that need to go on an individualized behavior plan. And they're the ones with a little bit more extreme. We're not actually hitting their needs just by teaching. We need to come in one-on-one. Maybe we need some behavior support with a one-on-one. Maybe we need direct instruction with time specifically with a SPED person or a counselor on a very specific behavior.
So just to make sure I'm getting this, because I've got all of you experts in front of me. So let's just say I heard you address tier 1 and I heard you address tier 2. Going back to what Ms. Robert, or tier 3. So maybe going back to what Ms. Roberts was speaking to, would a tier 2 maybe be somebody who's a little bit more extreme with that ADHD diagnosis, who needs a little bit more help, a little bit more redirection, and then they're back and we're good to go. So that in between is how do we readdress? Just to make sure it's.
And maybe that kiddo, maybe you could clarify, maybe they have a buddy classroom, so they're struggling in this one, so they go next door until they can get themselves together and come back, and they work with the teacher and the team on that. So there's a variety of things that could be happening for those kids who need a little bit more.
And I see that. I'm trying to just understand the tiers so that when we're having the conversations, right, because some things seem extreme, and then.
So that extreme, I think, would fall in that tier 3. Those kiddos need a little more of wraparound services, help with the counselor, possibly some work with the social worker, one-on-one time, maybe with the SPED teacher or somebody else who can direct instruct on behaviors, those kinds of things.
One more question.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry,
Go ahead.
guys. So do we have a way to identify how many levels of tiers we have in a school?
We have 3.
But I mean, how many tier 3 kids are in one school? How many tier 2 kids are in one school? We have that identifier.
We are working.
We're working towards that goal.
Some schools are really far into that and could tell you right now, and other schools are really developing that system right now. So we are working to unify that.
Thank you.
If I may.
No, go ahead.
To complicate matters further,
thank you.
You may have a kid that's in tier 1 for 3 weeks in a row, and then goes to tier 3 with A behavior.
Got it.
Yeah. So so there, everything's okay. Everything's
It's
okay.
moldable.
And then exactly.
So it's ever changing.
Exactly. It's not really identifying the kid. It's identifying the behavior. And then when the behavior starts to happen repeatedly, then we increase our level of intervention or support around that kid is the idea, and how you would navigate that. But typically, it's an old educational RTI pyramid, or response to intervention or response to instruction. If 80% of your population gets their needs met with first-time instruction, then you've got tier 2, which is about 15% with that tier 1 instruction, then they're able to get it. And then you have your most significant, that 5%. That's not a perfect model, but just to provide some context or clarity, that's the idea of how it's intended to work.
Because the intention is to always get to the least restrictive environment for child.
And the intention also is to intervene and help give that student the tools that they need to be successful, move them back out or up a tier.
I wish you guys knew how much time I've dedicated to understanding this.
So we go to week-long workshops to try to
I want you guys to know.
Madam Chair,
So that was your 2-minute instruction on that. We can go further.
No, it's good. Sorry, Trustee Kirkman.
Yeah, so you have mentioned a couple of times where we want to get to a point where it's consistent. So one of the concerns that's been addressed to the board via email from teachers and whoever is that there's no consistency. Is that what we're talking about here? Is there a policy that needs to be implemented to provide some of that consistency within those tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Is that what you're talking about as far as that's what we want to work towards?
I'm gonna guess because I don't have context of all those things, but consistency in making sure that we have enough hands to take care of the needs. Consistency in how we are defining those things, making sure that we are intervening well for students, but also offering consequences. Not offering, giving consequences that are appropriate consistently. I don't know how I was trying to make that
I'm gonna offer a consequence to my 18-year-old
We're gonna
tonight.
give you a consequence, all right?
Offer.
We're trying to soften that.
Yeah.
But like consistency about what maybe would be happening at a Lake Ridge versus an Endeavor for those kind of behaviors.
And that's the difficult part is, one, working with little people, and they all have these, and that's really a struggle. And so when I hear if we could just be more consistent, that's what I'm thinking is how can you be consistent with working with people? But I wonder if the frustration might be with the policy, and is that something that the board needs to work on? And do we need to? That's kind of what I'm getting at. So.
Yeah, in our handbooks, and you can go into the elementary handbook, you'll see on pages 18 and 19, we have some guidelines, but what you can't do is take the context of what this little kid brings to the table, and so you need to be able to have a space for that, and then be able to.
And that was my final question that went to Anita, was that do we have stuff that's logged? So I just put dead on logged entries for extreme behaviors or following the handbook, because I'm trying to take the data that you guys are giving us and determine where the board fits into that data. So so that we can come back and we can create favorable solutions that benefit all truly. I mean, that's the goal here, is to take that through. And so that was my last question is does something need to happen with the handbook? Because that's where we would go, that's what we would look at, right? And I get it, because it can't always be super black and white because we are dealing with people.
Madam Chair, trustees, all those things that you've said are also accurate, but one of the other things, and this goes back to a comment that Trustee Kirkman just mentioned earlier, we also want to make sure teachers can teach.
Yep.
And that you're not just tracking data constantly about behavior A or behavior B. So, I mean, it's a very difficult problem. There's a lot of nuances with it as well, because teachers also have to teach lessons, also have to meet standards, also have to take assessments. And then on top of that, now you're trying to track the students did this behavior, it's at a level 1, it's at a level 2, am I entering this in the system? And that just takes so much time. That's why our teachers are so taxed as it is.
And I'm so sorry, Dr. Russell.
So no, you're fine.
Yeah.
So just with that point, I guess what I'm trying to ask for the board to understand is just it is kind of like an onion, where as you peel one layer, there's other layers to it. But that's why we need to continue working forward and trying to see if there's ways that we can try to balance how do we collect solid data so that we know that we have information to give resources to, yet how do we not tax our teachers so they can just teach?
And I totally agree. So let me give the final thought of where I'm going with this, is that my question is do we need to have somebody that this is their job? As we talk around things like behavior intervention and things along those lines, I do agree that data collection is difficult. If you have somebody time block their day, they would have to take probably almost 45 minutes of just logging. So I totally grasp what we're talking about. And that's why I'm getting at, you also need data for us to drive and make decisions. And so we are getting requests finally from teachers, which is great because there's solutions. But I'm also trying to understand where that would go. And nobody necessarily wants to hear this, but we may have somebody whose job, just like nobody wants to necessarily have a grant writer until the grant writer pays for itself. Nobody necessarily wants to call it that we need somebody just to collect data. But from where I'm sitting, the amount of data collection that's necessary, that can't be piled onto more, because the one thing that I can tell you I wholeheartedly agreed with Mr. Coffey with, I don't think that the solutions are teachers need to do more or learn new tricks. And I think that this board collectively does feel that way and has seen that. I think what I'm trying to determine are what are palpable solutions from afar. And so by no means do I want it to be misconstrued that I am asking for a teacher to do something else. I believe the option is an answer that we haven't come up with yet because we just got here. And we are finally seeing these extreme behaviors, and we are seeing more of these things. And so I'm trying to determine, because it will come to us when it has to do with positions or if new things need to be created, which new problems need new solutions. That is just 101. So I am solely asking so that I can understand there are extra accountabilities that bleed out every day. Is this a job? So just so everybody's clear on why I'm asking my questions, and I'm not a Troy processor, it's a problem. So
I will say, I think we're gonna talk about that, some things
Yeah.
that are already, that we can do quickly, and then some long-term things, we're gonna get to that part. Can I share a couple more things on that slide?
Sorry, I had a ton of questions. Yep.
No, that's totally fine. I did want to, super huge shout out to principals who collected the data, sent it to me, shared some
Yes.
observable things, and I want to share a couple of things that were stated. And one of them was a quote that came from some national research that is just coming in. So I'm just going to read it for you. Preliminary research on the effects of the pandemic indicate that children demonstrated increased externalizing problems, which we are seeing. Our data shows it. Attention problems and mood symptoms such as depression and anxiety when compared to pre-pandemic levels. It appears that children who attend virtual schools in comparison with in-person schools exhibit comparatively worse emotional and mental health issues. Our children are melting down and teachers are paying the price. Experts have lamented the rise of an inappropriate match of school curriculum and child development in the last decade. It goes on and on about that. Like, we have to up our game for the kiddos that we have in here. So I wanted to share that this is being talked about nationally, and there are numbers coming in for that. I don't know about the state. We'll dig into that.
That was super impactful, Mrs. Munn.
Thank you. And I want to share, first of all, shout out to principals who are in the room who came to help clarify. Mr. Pruitt at Iowa, Ms. Slober from Central Elementary, and Ms. Carl Reynolds from Snake River. And I wanted to share, Ms. Slober had written for us, and I think she really summed it up. So I'm going to share her words exactly that she sent to me, if I may. She said, I've noticed the saturation of behaviors in gen ed classrooms and students enrolling in K-5 who have no prior identification via community resources or schooling. So a higher number of kids who have not been seen in some of our screening things that we can do in pre-K, they weren't exposed to those things during the pandemic. So they're coming to us with no previous screening or services in place. The level of need per student is also amplified. So yes, we had behaviors before, now we're seeing more intense behaviors, disruptive. The mental health needs, the academic needs, the food insecurity, the lack of housing, the unmet medical needs, etc. We have students who do not qualify for our extended programs, but are lacking skills necessary to be in the gen ed setting with resource room support. So really, she kind of summed up all the things that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of those kind of things, and we're just trying to figure out the best approach with the resources that we have so that we can support teachers. I appreciate Ms. Roberts here because she's on the front lines every day, and we're hearing this repeatedly from teachers, like, this is hard. And for all the students in the classes, it can be really difficult. And so we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to impact those things. Can you go back to our slide, make sure see what else we might need to cover from elementary? I want to be clear, those students, so number of behaviors resulting in suspension, I just want you to know where that comes from. That comes from the state, the numbers that we have to report to the state thus far. Those go into our incident management in Power School. We have other places that schools are monitoring their data because they have quick and easy access points to be able to segregate the data as far as location, students, classroom, lunchroom, those kind of things, so they can make quick decisions within their school. We have a couple of different those things. So we need to get uniform on where we're housing the data, but that data on suspensions comes right out of Power School.
Is that ISS and OSS suspension?
I believe so, yes.
Those are state reportable, which would be what
The half day.
the half day or more suspensions. Yeah. And then students on the individualized behavior plan, and I will say this number I believe is actually low for the students that need to be on behavior plans. These are those tier 3 kiddos that we've been talking about who have some really that we have some serious interventions going on for them so that they can be successful in their school environment.
And that number does include some students that are not qualified as special education
Correct.
students, some that are. So some, because of their disability, may have an individualized behavior plan as well as an academic plan. But we do have some individualized behavior plans for kids that are not qualified as special education students.
But their behaviors are severe enough to need this individual.
So, just one more question, because totally getting that we have kids, but what I'm really hearing as well is that in addition, we might have kids that have never been classified, that maybe went without 2 years of learning, no assessment. We get them as a third grader and we have no data from anywhere, right?
Yeah, I would say kinder is more likely. We do have some first grade and some second grade, but we have some kids coming in from homeschooling or some of those places that haven't been.
That have decided to come back but have missed a few years.
Right, and those would be students who probably need some assessment for special education services. Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, just to answer, to share that a little bit, it shares the need of early childhood education, the importance of that, because that's often a huge identifier. Just the lack of access to that during the pandemic, and also just the lack of resources that we do have as a community in general does kind of hamper that. So if a student doesn't have time to get to preschool, to adjust to what a school setting is like, when they show up the first day of kindergarten, they're not ready. And then we're dealing with severe behaviors on that very first day, and that's not, and the expectation of kindergarten has increased greatly from what it used to be. Students now must read, students must write, students must add, subtract, and then past it was,
Color inside the lines.
yes. Much simpler, much more developmental.
Play.
But because the standards built on kindergarten, that kindergarten year is so critical with it. And former kindergarten teacher, I taught kindergarten my first year, it has changed a lot. So that the requirements are. So that helps answer some of those questions, but I want to move on. We're going to move on to our secondary slide to talk a little bit about our secondaries, and then we will come back and share a few things that we're doing, and then to answer some of the questions I think that came about some things that we might need to do in the future to kind of address it.
Okay.
Can I just, I've been running numbers, sorry, I've been counting the data back here, but I just want to go off what Mr. Yarbrough said. Those third tier is usually should be about 5%. So remembering trustees that at 2%, you got to times that number by 2.5. So really about 304 kids should be on individualized behavior plans compared to the 143 that we have there. But also just the amount of time and energy it takes all involved in the process, and it is to determine those things and the correct placement and what that plan will look like and how those things happen. My hat just goes off to all those people that are working hard for kids to do that. And yeah, don't have a solution today, but so glad that we are taking the time to focus on this.
Thank you for bringing up that. It takes a lot of resources to be able to get that and do it well. I appreciate that.
Hats off to the teachers who are still dealing with the aftermath.
One last slide with what Dr. Russell just mentioned. We're going to show you just secondary data. Now, these are evidentiary hearings. So again, we've talked about a lot of things. I just want to frame here. This could include someone from a risk and threat that is determined to be a high risk, and then it gets to an evidentiary hearing. It could be someone at the secondary level who has had some habitual things that pile up. It could be something that's such a significant issue when it happens that we have to bring for an evidentiary hearing. This is the data from 2015 and 16 all the way to 2022, 2023. Again, from 2015 to 2022, those are all yearly data marks. You can see even in our secondaries, again, we're higher than what we have been. 44 hearings, different evidentiary hearings, 26 middle students, 18 high school students, and then there have been 4 expulsions this year in our district. I would like to say as a secondary administrator, expulsions are the worst part of your job. You hate to take a child out of the school system. And that is the hard part that we're in, is that there are some of these things that are really, really difficult to navigate. And so those are not taken lightly by anybody in the system. And we just like to state that is the last resort. So.
Speaking for myself, but I think maybe the whole board might be included, we echo the same sentiment.
Ditto. Okay. All right. We have questions at this point. If anybody has any questions, i.e. me, I've asked them all. Thank goodness. Trustees, any other questions regarding this topic?
This topic?
Yeah, the behavior.
Oh, we're not done with the.
Yeah, Chair Taylor, we would like to share kind of, I think we need to run through if we're time. Let's go through the things that we're doing right now to try to trustees. There are some things.
I meant the data, sorry. Any other questions
yes.
surrounding the data?
Any questions?
Yep.
Yeah, I was really thinking about how to come in and present. Yes, we're struggling, and still, like, I want to honor the teachers and the principals who are doing this work every day. They're in it. They're in the game, day in and day out, and the things that we're going to ask for or support to be able to deal with this. But I want to just shout out to our amazing educators who keep coming here, keep coming to work, and keep loving on kids. I appreciate that. So let's look at that slide. Yeah, some supports that we have going that right now. We're working on professional development where we've asked each elementary school to come together with a behavior response team. And that is really a team who can put their heads together and really look at interventions that could help students. So matching what the behavior is telling us that the need is to what we're actually intervening for that kiddo. And this is separate from consequences, and I want to be clear about that. Students are receiving consequences for their behavior, but then what do we do when we come along behind to support that student to change behavior? And we're working to build capacity in those teams to really look at the data and make sure that we're correctly matching those things, intervention to the
Okay, I'm gonna ask a really hard question. If I want to be on that team, am I a volunteer on top of what I do? If I was a teacher in the school, am I gonna volunteer to be on that team on top of what's going on? I want us to understand the reality.
Yeah, and so, yes.
Yeah.
And in every building, there are people who are really dedicated to this.
Yeah.
And part of that.
And some by position, our school psych, our school counselor, those folks are the folks on there. And we are providing district level support from our special education department. We have some behavioral specialists that are going in to help build that capacity and work with that we really want to hit the ground running in August with a good plan in every building. We've already started that work. We went through all the elementaries. There's one left to meet with today, one left to meet with. Met with Roosevelt today and their administrative team and their specialist team. Those are the ideas to build that. And yes, we've got to figure out a way to support that. But yeah, we don't have anybody left. I think it's your job question.
Yeah, no, and because we working in the schools, you have so much budget, we get it. So I just want us to understand.
We also are running right now. We're running 2 data tracking systems separate from Power School. And there's a whole history that I could get into about why, but Swiss is like the first to come out with a good data tracking system to help you really desegregate the data. PBIS Rewards is one that we use because we can track both positive things and the consequences and the referral part. So we can do all of those in one system, so students can actually get points through PBIS, and all the positive things come with that. So it's a little bit more robust system. And so some schools have gone there and some have stayed with the Swiss. And there's a few who have not, they're wanting to log inside Power School. And so they use log entries and incident reports.
Trustee Simpson.
Thank you. I just thinking about, adding on to teachers' plates, and I know some things that gets overlooked a lot is adding one more new system or theme. I know. So I get wanting a uniform system to report. I totally understand that. But I feel like if something's working in buildings, I would hope that we're honoring that and being flexible in how we collect that data, especially because they are having to track more, and I would say they probably didn't have enough to track anyway, and so now you add even more, and it just is way more time consuming. So hopefully,
agreed. It is, and it's another system that you need to get into. Yeah. Currently, we have 3 vice principals that serve between 4 elementary schools. We have two school resource officers where we work with Nampa School District or Nampa Police Department.
We have the STEP program at Gateway, so Gateway serves both our special ed students who are really at-risk kiddos for they struggle with violence. And we have a STEP program, those are for gen ed kids who struggle, and not just violence, but like eloping and some of those really severe behaviors. We have Nova, which is our online, and actually I think this year I am learning quite a bit that there are some students where the physical school setting is not the right place, and so we've actually had some of those students move to Nova, where we just take the physical setting right off their plate and they can access their academics through Nova. We are partnering, Cindy Cook has done an amazing job to reaching out, partnering with some other outside agencies to bring in one-on-ones. We have lots of students who have been identified as needing one-on-one behavior supports and not enough people to fill their shoes. And so she is partnering with them, and I think you'll hear a little bit later talking about possibly doing some of our own hiring. So those are the things we have right now. We don't we can get to what we are doing, what we would like to do in the future in just a minute.
Any questions on the elementary?
And I'm sure I have forgotten a few things.
Trustees, any questions regarding that information?
I'm going to share the secondary things that we have in place again because the environments are different. So Tyler, if you go to the next slide, please. So in the high school right now, what we're trying to implement, one of the things we've been doing has been a common mentoring block that's common across all of our three comprehensive high schools. Union and Gateways also have some other programs that they do that are very similar in nature to the mentoring block, trying to get kids connected with an adult outside of just the academic piece. We do have an initial high school counselor for our comprehensive high schools. We use some ESSER funding to load that into the system, and that has been something that has been very, very positive and beneficial in a number of ways, including some anecdotal evidence from our counselors and the load that's been taken off of them. We do have an increased focus around the high school learning plan and the idea from 8th grade heading into high school. What is your goal? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be when you graduate from high school or leave this institution? So a focus there using our BCA class, but there's been a lot of tooling in changing that up to be even more robust than it has been in the past. We do have youth court at a couple of our a couple of our high schools. Youth court is truly run by other kids in the system who maybe have been who've had behavioral issues or those have come up, but then they've worked and been successful, and they serve on youth court for other students if those are infractions or things that they can work through that. We do work with Canyon County, the Juvenile Justice Center on that. So we have a youth court program at Nampa High, and I believe one of our middle schools. I apologize, I can't remember, but I know that it's running in Nampa High. Middle school, we have an advisory block as well. Some second step curriculum at East Valley, Lone Star, and middle school, again, trying to help navigate around that. Character Strong is what is how they do that at South Middle School. We have PBIS at Lone Star, Nova, Rise, and West Middle School. And then Swiss again at Lone Star Middle School and West Middle School. So you see, like much from that elementary world, but some of those things are still there. Both levels, we do have the implementation of RISE, which is our pre-expulsion school. We started that at the beginning of this year. Our most significant cases with either habitual issues with students or significant issues with students. We do have thermal courses, which are around vaping particularly and drug use. Site-based school resource officers 4 days a week. We do have those in the secondaries. Again, the resource officer there, maybe more than the elementary, but definitely a huge help for our district and partnering with Nampa PD. We have monthly dean trainings where we are trying to get collaboration and calibration between the deans of our middle schools and our comprehensive high schools. Charlie Health is a new thing that has just come on. It is a telehealth provider for intensive support for students that come out of maybe a mental hospital scenario or where they receive treatment and they have a significant issue maybe coming into the school from either suicidal ideation or those types of things. And we set them up with Charlie Health, and all we run is the site that they can actually use the telehealth to get access to a counselor to deal with those significant outpatient issues right as they come out of some of those facilities. We have vape sensors in all of our secondary buildings, and we use Gaggle to monitor all of the communication on school devices and or school accounts from our students to see where those holes might be, where bullying might happen, where threats might happen, where things that are inappropriate happen, so we can support all our students. So those are some of those secondary supports that we have. and we use on a day-to-day basis in all those areas.
Trustees, any questions?
Yeah, a little bit, I'm interested, Madam Chair, about the youth court. So is that administered by juvenile corrections, by the court system, or is it administered by this school district?
It's administered in conjunction with the county. Trustee Kirkman, we have there's a liaison there. Heather Ramos is her name. I don't know Heather. She works to help set that up, and then the school runs. If we have students who meet the criteria to run into that, sometimes that will happen rather than going down the route of a ticket, for example, for marijuana possession. They might go through that youth court as one of the things that we work with law enforcement and the county for diversion.
So it's more of it's a specialty court.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Correct.
I'm thinking there's a judge that's 16 years old, and then there's like a mock court. That's what I was thinking. Sorry.
They do, the process is very similar, where they do have someone who's an advocate for the student, someone that typically a dean or someone else that's an adult in that role serving as the quote unquote judge, but they navigate through that process and they have someone advocate for them and work through what consequences can come of that and to work through the process.
So specialty court like drug court, veterans court. Okay, now it makes sense.
Yep.
Of course, the other might not be a bad idea too.
Yeah.
Pure court. Call it pure court.
Yep.
Trustee, right?
Yes, so you're done with your presentation or not?
One more slide.
One more slide.
One more slide.
We apologize. We know it's been long.
Trustee Simpson has a question that's relevant here.
Okay.
I just wondered, do you feel there's a need for more SROs? I would say at the elementary level more specifically is my question, but also at the secondary level where it's only 4 days a week. So at both.
I would highly advocate for that. I would advocate that we definitely need more elementary support to begin with. We definitely need to take care of what's happening there. Because of the contract and working with Nampa Police and how their shifts and all those things work, it can be a challenge when the SRO at a secondary building is pulled to deal with numerous elementary things, because 2 and supporting 14 buildings is hard. So if we can do that, I would definitely suggest that's a major area where we can improve and work to increase that presence in our schools. Our SROs, the SROs I work with are amazing individuals. They understand they're not a beat cop. They're not out on patrol. They actually do a great job of developing relationships with kids and navigating through that. And I've seen very, very positive things come out of having a well-placed, well-connected, relationally driven SRO. It can mean a lot to a school.
Can I just so you know, in the elementary, we have 2 SROs. They have been assigned 7 schools each, and they spend as much time in those schools that they can, but they get pulled pretty quickly if something comes up from school to school. They're on for 4 days a week. So on Monday, we only have 1, and on Friday, which is probably a bigger deal, we only have 1 that's available to us. So yes.
So in layman's term, they have the ability to deal with fires because they have 4 days,
Correct.
7 schools, so they're jumping from issue to issue.
Yeah. In reality, that's what.
Yeah.
But that's a Nampa Police Department schedule. That's not a Nampa school district schedule for that district.
And kudos to them, like they're doing amazing work.
Yeah.
When they can be in the buildings, building relationships, that is exactly what they're doing.
And we've always had a very favorable relationship with our law enforcement.
We have a contract with the Nampa Police Department, so that is something that we could possibly ask for.
And it's been something we've discussed in great length, is the addition of SROs. Should we allow them to go on to the last slide?
One more.
That topic that I just.
Actually, we do have 2 slides. You're gonna love the last slide.
Questions. I already got mine.
So these are some of our hopes and thoughts and ways we are trying to address. Again, I hope that's come out with some of the questions. So not just to hit the highlights here. Lori, is there anything you want to talk about specifically?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I didn't add a lot of the mental health and those kind of things into this because we're going to be talking about that next month. So just know there are other components that we can add to it. But at the district level, someone who can help coordinate mental health services, so clinicians who can work with our students on campus, sort of like Charlie Health that you were talking about, or we do have some that can come on campus and see kids. That helps things like consistency for those kids to need those services.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about elementary sports?
I'm happy to do
Some
that.
other things we are doing is hiring early. One of the things we found as we moved into August was that we had a few general education classrooms that didn't have a teacher, which in all my years of education, I'd never seen that before. We've always been able to fill those. And so we started hiring early. We want to make sure that we are offering to good candidates. And so we've already done that, even though, so we're pre-hiring and to be able to fill when those openings come up. Extra behavior support. I think this is the big ask that we have, is so that we have a VP or a dean or behavior specialist in each of our schools, so we have more hands on deck. One thing that he didn't really talk about is how much time administrators are spending on behavior. It's I think Ashley said in her notes, and I think it could be collaborated by our principals here, 65 to 70% of their time is really spent either in a few minute interaction or sometimes up to an hour or more, depending on the severity of the student issue at the time. So getting enough hands to help, and I'm going to tell you, like, this will be helpful. Will it be enough? Will it solve everything? Probably not. But what it will do is help us to be able to build systems and strengthen systems and have people who can focus on the behavior. One place that you're seeing a lot of, especially when you look at the slide, as far as staff members being hurt, a lot of those things come out of our autism classrooms. That's part of the disability. Students that are aggressive and struggle with the social interaction. And so having an autism specialist who can help us build and strengthen those programs is something that we would like to bring in. Of course, we've already talked about getting clear, consistent data repeatedly. So, and then again, continue to build capacity and some fiscal support for that. This summer, we have Jessica Minahan coming to work with our teams on the behavior code, and that's again matching behavior with interventions that are appropriate, and just build a strengthening of capacity in that. And some long-term things that we'd like to look at is possibly expanding some of the things that Gateways can offer us. I don't know what that looks like. There's tons of obstacles to that. The building, finding personnel who are willing to work in that realm. That's not everybody's cup of tea. We don't have people lined up saying, pick me to work with our most severe
and even if we
EBD
did,
students.
even if we did, doesn't mean that they can do it.
Right, exactly.
Because it's very specialized.
It's very specialized, right? So those are some of the things we need to start thinking about ahead, and expanding some of the EBD programs we have in our buildings. We run one at Willow Creek, so expanding that a little bit.
One of the big things for next year on the secondary side is continue that extra counselor. That's something, again, we plan to use out of ESSER funding. It's been a significant help. Plan to do that, as well as the other things that we are seeing across the secondary side. We talked about those things and just tightening up and getting better at those things. I think one of the hard parts of this, and we've talked about it, like the tenor of the conversation has been we want to find the solution. The reality is there isn't a solution, right? It's a lot what Mr. Coffey talked about in some of his things. This isn't going away. It's how do we navigate it, and how do we support it, and how do we minimize it? And so I think that's important for us to hear, is that we can't change all of the things that are going to bring some of the kids that come to us with the challenges that they do. But what we can do is find ways to better support our staff, that they can handle that they don't feel so burnt out, that they don't feel so taxed. Those are the things that we do have within our control. And so I want to put that in the room again of it's not a solvable thing. It's something that we can work to address and continue to work to address, because that's part of what we do as educators. So.
And trustees, just one final comment I'll add. Well, there's one other intervention that I think that we're looking at for next year. That is a transitional kindergarten. I mentioned earlier about the need of students coming in and not being prepared. We're actually looking at developing a kindergarten class that would specifically help the students transition from either preschool or middle school into kindergarten. So that's one of the things we're looking at. In general, I think this is an important thing just to share is the amount of resources that are needed. When I was out speaking to the community and in the bond, one of the things they mentioned was they're often asking for so many. Well, the need is great. We have a lot of needs in our school district. 50% of our kids or more are in poverty. We're showing over 15% of our students are learning English 12 to 13% have special education needs. So it's a great, as you can see, the behaviors are high as well. We have a large need in our schools.
To a quick question.
Trustee Kirkland.
Before Trustee Dahlia gets to his page of questions. And this was one that I wanted to ask a couple of slides ago, but what type of support do the staff have? I mean, what type of support do our staff have?
So we have seen in some locations, we've seen a few instances of an outside entity coming in to provide support for our staff in the form of counseling.
Like is there a CISM or something, like a critical incident stress management type of a?
Not really at this time systematically, Trustee Kirk, we don't have that. Now, I will say that those schools that have mental health support for teachers as well, or behavioral health support, if you will, we're tending to see that those buildings have some regulation that is helping deal with the tide of what's coming in. I won't suggest that's in any way anybody's fault that doesn't have that, but we are seeing the adults maybe not as stressed because they do have an outlet, they do have some way to navigate what that is, as well as their own personal lives. We have staff that are stressed beyond belief outside of their job. So, but we are seeing that as something we would like to explore deeper of how can we help with that. And those are significant challenges. Obviously, we have our EAP program, which is 8 free counseling sessions outside of school. That's hard for our staff to access, and sometimes that's not enough. Exactly, it's not enough for what the need is. Hopefully, I would say this as a former administrator, and I would hope that most of my folks in Nampa, I would say this is that we have the administrators we have the people that are there working for them and working with them. It doesn't solve all those problems, but they're there for them. So
that EAP program is offered through insurance.
Yes. Yep.
And that's relatively new, so maybe a lot of staff don't realize it's there.
The answer is not enough.
Yeah. Trustees, any other questions, comments?
Is it my turn?
We've been waiting.
We've been waiting.
Okay,
And I would like to, we have some people who with boots on the ground who are interested.
Yes, and I probably will call somebody.
Okay.
But no, I truly appreciate all the information. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. There's a lot of information here, and I was looking at it before coming here, and still, and I'm pretty sure there's no absolute solvable because we can't control society. But I believe that there's good, better, and best. Okay, and right now I believe we're floating, and I know there's some solutions that have been put in place, but I believe some teachers have been complaining about this for a very long time. And right now we're reacting to it, but it's not too late. Let me speak about the bond a little bit. I know it doesn't have nothing to do with this, but it does to me. When we were presented the bond information, they gave us different levels. They gave us, this is how much we need to fix this much. This is, I think 3 different options. And of course, we said, let's choose a top option and let the voters decide. Okay. And you guys did the research. It was pretty cool, by the way. You guys did your research. You guys put all the information in there, what we needed, and wham, we were, and the people that came inside, they were very instructed and edified, and they understood. Okay. And I believe that this is such a problem what we have right now with behavior, and that we need to do something similar to that. I need to know personally, and I can't speak for the trustees, what will take us to good, what will take us to better, and what will take us to best. What are the steps that we need to take? Are you talking with the association and coming into agreement with those steps? Because I think this is a thing between both of you. I don't think it's individually something for that board or for the district to decide. Are you looking at other ways to resolve this. You know, I'm thinking about the kids that I met, and I don't want to get emotional, but there are kids in the autistic level, and you know, or that are having issues, mental health issues that sometimes it's very hard to figure out who those kids are because they're just quiet all the time. But how do we, you know, how do we create a plan that helps the unseen? Are we looking at different alternative options? We don't have to hire people. A lot of times we can just do a third party, you know. There's probably, I don't know, you guys probably have already seen, done all of this homework, but in my head, are there companies that could do a lot of this determining the levels and or doing the assessments or doing all this so that our teachers are not being burdened? You know, are we looking at all the different sides? You know, this to me is more critical than our bond. And our bond was $230 million or whatever. Okay. And I want to make sure that we create those plans and so that we can have something to shoot for. And if it means changing policy, then we need to figure out, okay, let's do it. If it means, you know, getting more funding, let's talk about, and we don't have the money. Oh my goodness, let's talk about a grant. We've been talking about hiring a grant writer for a long time, and I haven't seen nothing come out of that. I'm sorry, maybe something has come out of it, I just haven't seen it. And I don't want to fault anybody because I don't want to be negative. I'm trying to be positive here. But sometimes it's hard to be positive when you see so much, so many problems. And I know we can't fix it, but I know we can get somewhere where it's reasonably doable and where our teachers will feel like they're being heard. That's where I want to get to. I would like to see a monthly report on this, with data you have brought on, seeing changes, monthly changes. I would like to see the difference in schools, but I know that's difficult. But just whatever you can give us, I want to see where the trends are, and I want to see what things you guys are doing, what plans you're coming up with. I would like to see reports on this, along with how you're working with the association to accomplish this. Okay. Sometimes you don't have to achieve, as long as you work together, I think that makes a lot of people happy. You may not achieve everything you want to achieve, but I think you will be reasonably satisfied that everybody's working together, people are being heard. I would also like to see what kind of engagement, if there's a way to measure engagement of parents, and maybe it's a checkbox so you guys mark or have or somebody marked where it says parents are engaged and parents are not engaged. Maybe it's something that's simple, because that also tells me a different side of the problem. If parents are not engaged, we're going to continue having this. If, what is it, 10%, 50%, I don't know. I do want to thank you for what you're doing. I don't want to dismiss the hard work and effort by everybody. I know there's some, when we talk about the autism spectrum, there's some jobs that the government requires so much. Cindy Cook, you told me something about this. There's jobs that are very difficult to get because the government requires so much. Remember we were talking about this?
Or pre-certified.
Are you talking about certification?
Yeah.
Behavior support people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we're not finding those people because of that, you know? And sometimes there's no other way around it. Do we need to compete with and steal from other districts?
Steal's a strong word.
Strong word.
I love
Lots of strong words. That one was strong.
Or take,
Still.
steal. No, I don't know.
We
I'm
might
just
have used
wondering-
that word.
Recruit. I am terrible with that. But do we need to do that? Do we need to increase pay in different areas where it's very difficult to find that demand? Anyways, those are my thoughts. I just had to throw it in there. I do appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Trustees, Dr. Russell, any other comments or questions?
I do have a comment, and this is something that I would like to see the district kind of focus a little bit more on when and where appropriate, but staff wellness. I was just kind of looking through some policies, and the only policy that I see, just a cursory review, is staff health. And it talks about if a staff member is in a position where they can't fully discharge their duties and that thing, then the district can. But I really want to see some focus on what can we do to support our staff who maybe go through these critical incidents. Because I know from in my other life that we are focusing on staff wellness and providing resources in communities and around that they can have access to. So I don't know, and I'm sure that's not something that you haven't ever thought about, but given the rise in these incidences, these extreme incidences, sometimes we just kind of assume that the staff are going to deal with it because they've been dealing with it. But now that they're getting to that extreme level, they don't know how to necessarily don't know how to deal with it. And so maybe looking at a comprehensive staff wellness program for which may include some additional training, which may include additional support or partnerships with community St. Luke's, whatever the case might be. I don't know. I would really like to see maybe some of.
Trustee Taylor and Trustee Kirkman, next month we will discuss more behavioral and mental health, and I think we were going to bring some what we're currently doing, kind of very similar, what we're seeing, what we're currently doing, and what we need to do. So that might help, but yes, I think we will address that.
Yeah.
So I guess just to address the entire group, since our last meeting, I feel as if our administration has worked tirelessly on this. I talk to Greg almost daily, and daily I would tell everybody that this is a topic of discussion. And realistically, what I believe needs to happen and what I've requested is a better understanding for our trustees. So what we've requested is an organizational chart and a program identifier. Because one of the things that I think happens from this podium is the first one is that regardless of how people want to judge it, we're 5 people who are asked to openly mitigate our thoughts for the first time in public together. And we're all 5 different people that sit up on this board. So my goal has really been to bring a better understanding around the clarity of what we do before we sit up here and ask you to change everything that you do, because I've realized through watching the meetings, which is horrible, by the way, because I'm just right here with my big face. But I realized that oftentimes when an ask is asked, not enough is understood of the process of what's already being done and the work that's already happened. And what I will tell you is this last month I've seen palpable change. And I think that that's what we have to ask ourselves for. You guys have a ship to move. I will forever be grateful for these last few months as chair and the relationship that I've been able to develop with Dr. Russell to really get a glimpse of what you guys do on a daily basis. And the job for our administrators never stops. One time I asked Greg how many hours a week he thought he worked, and he counted the time that he was here. And I was like, I talked to you at like 10 o'clock at night. Like, we're not friends, Greg. Like, I'm a trustee, right? Like, but seriously, we're not friends. I don't talk about diet to myself. Seriously. No, people, right?
Can you edit this?
No, I think that people have to pay homage much to that. I'm not calling Greg because I want to
Chair
update
Taylor,
him
no
on my
offense,
life.
no.
Right.
I understand.
But we have to also pay homage to the fact that I think it's very real with what you said is our administrators bear a lot of this, and 65% of your time dealing with student issues, how much more time do you have for leadership and management and accountability of your staff? I mean, I think that we have to hear two things. You're spread thin, so every time we ask more, without a complete understanding of what we're already doing, we're setting you up to fail. My sole job this year is to set our entire community up for success. So I just want the trustees to know that there are some things that I have coming that I really genuinely feel will be very helpful tools, because we do need to address this and we do need to determine what positions are essential and how we can add. And then on the backside of that as trustees, we have to figure out how to do it with no money, right? Because as our funds are about to end. So I want you guys to know that none of this is truly missed. And while I think all of these comments are good and give us things to think about, I just want you guys to understand that I do realize that there's a lot that you do that we don't see. And I'm grateful. And I'm glad that you reminded me that children aren't a problem to be solved, but you know I like solutions. But right, it's sometimes and I think people need to see this. I don't know that you guys have gotten the opportunity to leave that fight or flight mode just yet here in this district. And I think that people have to start to see that we have you guys in constant fight or flight. And if nobody else sees it, I do. So that's it.
Thank you. I have one more question.
Go, please. Sorry, I know. Nobody expected us to talk for hours about this.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. But I just have one question that came to mind, and I just need a reminder of like, how is counseling, like a counselor position at buildings, how is that? Is it a similar FTE like teachers, or how does that work? I just am, and I'm not talking about counselors, like outside counselors coming in. I'm thinking more of the counseling positions that we are.
I share from the elementary.
Yeah.
Each school is allotted a counselor, and so the struggle with that is we have some schools who are over 600 kids, one counselor, and some schools that are less than 300 with a counselor. And so there's some inequity there, but every school has some access to a counselor. So and it's a little more, it's different in secondary.
Yeah, Chair Taylor, Trustee Simpson, and just to caveat that again, the school with 350 kids that has a counselor, they may have 80% poverty. And so even looking at student number, about which is typically how we try to determine the need for counselors based on that number, that does not always equate to fairness across, because some students have more needs than others. And it's a very difficult thing about how you pin it. And so I think that goes back to this idea of trying to get more data so we can understand what we're seeing in each and how to resource the schools, because we typically use student number. And that's the short answer, is we use student numbers, but that student number doesn't always tell the full story.
I will say there's not a counselor that isn't hopping all the time.
Yeah, sure.
In every building.
Can I ask a follow-up? This might be a Courtney question, sorry, Mr. Stoffer question, but I believe there was a capacity number, like buildings, like what's that sweet spot of capacity percentage per building, and then like just to know where my brain is thinking is like, could we keep our counselor numbers even if we did do some boundary shifting and move schools to where maybe we have 1.5 counselors or 2 counselors at an elementary building? I don't know. That's
Chair
my
Taylor, Trustee Simpson, that was kind of a nice segue that leads us into our next comment.
Greg, take that opening real quick.
And I believe Mr. Stoffer could come. He's going to share some stuff around building utilization and that kind of stuff. So maybe we can
yes,
pause
and
that
that's
question
fine.
and
Yep.
come answer that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stoffer? Oh, Dr. Russell, facilities plan?
Chair Taylor, are we ready to move into?
I believe, trustees, do we have any more questions regarding the behavior data reports? Okay.
All right, trustees, before you tonight, I'm going to lead you through 2 plans. Actually, 1 plan and then 1 kind of report. These are some that were shared with us earlier, and my purpose tonight is just to review with you some things that we had mentioned before. In the past, we have focused on building facility needs, the FCI, and some of those things, and that kind of will work on. But you'll see tonight, as I walk you through, I'm not going to go through every page. I'm just going to highlight a couple that do discuss a little bit around the needs of boundaries and what we're providing for our schools around those things. So the first one we're going to look at is our school facilities plan. I'm going to have Tyler go ahead and bring that up. We're going to start on page 4 of that plan. And that, actually, Tyler, you're just on it. There we go. Again, looking at this plan, this was based on really 4 major things. One is just looking at our schools and the educational framework. How do they deliver education? We were looking at our demographics and our enrollment. We looked at the condition of the buildings, and then we looked at funding sources. So those are the 4 major things that we looked at to build this facilities plan. And Tyler, if you go to page 8 of that plan. Page 8 here, what it mentions is this 10-year plan. The first 5 years are tactical, so those are the things that we're in right now. The next 10 years of this, or last 5 years, would be more strategic. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the key ones that we looked at was our facility and the conditions of them, trying to keep that below 15%. We talked about that in the bond, so we're not really focusing on that. What we're focusing on is that bullet point, that the 4th one down there, where it says the plan should be proactive to enrollment and demographic changes. That we should focus on balance of enrollment and maintaining acceptable utilization rates. And this goes back to the comment that Trustee Simpson just mentioned. What is our utilization? And how has our enrollment changed, or how are we in balance or out of balance? And that's what we'll talk a little bit about tonight. Next slide is slide number 9. And just review, this talks around our recommendations. And again, this is really important because they are only recommendations. And we have recommendations around what buildings need to, are aging, what buildings we need to maintain. But if you look at the very bottom, there were some recommendations around the buildings that need to be reused, discontinued, or raised. And I think that brought up some serious concerns from our staff when you look at that and you think, oh my goodness, is my school going to be taken offline? Or is my school going to be repurposed? And I want to reiterate, we have made no decisions on that, but it was just one of the recommendations that came out of our committee as we went through that. We'll talk about a little bit what that might mean going forward, but those are not perfect either. We took an example of what if we took one of those schools offline and we ran some scenarios with it, and as Lisa's administration, we ran up with a lot of issues that may not, what looks like on paper is going to work, in actual reality does not, if that makes sense. So just want to, again, put that there for you, as these are recommendations of how to continue with our plan. If we go to page 13 on that, the last one talks about some implementations, recommendations for implementation. And so one of the first ones that it mentions right there is to conduct a district-wide boundary and feeder pattern process. And that's based on 3 bullet points under there. You'll see that's a process based around community input, conducting large-scale meetings with our community, and then involving the Board of Trustees around what are their expectations for schools, and happy to share what that might look like for you if that's something we want to look at. The other recommendations you'll see deal with this idea of looking at our facilities, and but we've kind of already done that with some of the bond work with it. But that top one was important. So those are just some of the key components that were out of this plan, our facilities, and I'm going to take us to our state of the schools, which was a report that we looked at and went through. And there are a couple other key important things that maybe share how we came up with some of those recommendations in the facilities report. So Tyler, if you bring that up, and we go to page 3. This deals with a little bit with our enrollment. It talks about the population growth that we're seeing here in our community, particularly around the county. We're seeing a lot of growth. You'll see that. You'll see the building permits have increased a lot. Now that graph that says Idaho live births, you'll notice that goes down. That's just for the whole state. But what we did look at in our enrollment report, when we did our enrollment analysis about 4 or 5 years ago, the most shocking stat to me was the live births that we're seeing in the city. What we're seeing is stagnant. We're not seeing live births increase as the population increase, which that tends to indicate that we're getting more folks that are moving into our communities that don't have children, or empty nesters, or retiring here because it's a great community and a great place to do that. So we're not seeing that kind of growth that we saw early in the 2000s. So we don't anticipate having a lot of kids coming in the future. And I'm happy to bring more information with that if you'd like to see that another time. But I thought that was an interesting one. Tyler, if we go to page 4. Page 4 is important as well. If you look at that kind of red data, those blocks kind of in the middle, what that shows is our population growth and that boom that we had in the early 2000s, particularly from like 2003 up to like 2007, right before our first major recession. Those students are moving through our system, and a lot of them have moved out of our system. So we're seeing, again, less live births, less families with children in our district, and a lot of those families that did have those have kind of moved on. So we are seeing a change in our demographics, and a change a little bit. You'll look at our enrollment there, and you'll see that bubble, and it reflects that, those line graphs bottom, where we were about 7 or 8 years ago with almost 15,000 students. As those students have moved through our system, you'll see that we have slowly dropped every year. I think it mentions around 7 straight years of seeing an enrollment drop. And I want to share that a lot of that is based on the kind of community of Nampa and how it's growing and moving. Sometimes that is used against us in a way to share that, maybe we're not the strongest school system and that kind of thing, but a lot of it is demographic as well, I think we're seeing. All right, next slide would be number 6. This is an interesting one because it talks about where we are seeing the population boom, and a lot of it is, as we know, on the outsides of our city, on the outskirts in our county, around Valley View. Those are the homes that are being built. If you take time tonight, you can walk out. We have a little map out here in the hallway that shows all the plots of the future home sites and the developments. Many of them are outside our district. Many of them are to the north of town where there's space. And so we expect there to be growth in the county, but as you look inside those blue lines and those red little bars and those things, not a ton happening actually inside our boundaries. Most of it is outside that as we grow. Slide number 21, if you would, Tyler, kind of move through that. And this is the one I'm going to have Mr. Stauffer come and kind of share with us. This actually goes back to the question that Trustee Simpson was mentioning around, what is that utilization? How do we want to utilize our schools? What kind of educational adequacy do they provide? And then, of course, you'll see the condition they're in. Mr. Stauffer will just share a little bit about that.
Madam Trustee, Trustees, Trustee Simpson, if you'd like, in the same report on page 10, it does break down each of one of our schools and their utilization, which some of this information comes from on the far right column. So that's where the actual data, the aggregate data comes from as we start speaking to this third column here in this, this graph. So as we talked about looking at our buildings and their capacities and the educational adequacy for those buildings, we were able to determine 3 different separate categories of information that we have presented or found in this report. The first one is that FCI, and that's the status or the health of our physical buildings. So in this graph, red is not good, green is good. So in that very first column, when we're looking at our 10-year projections, the red is not where we want to be. That in reality, if you look at anything from, I would say from Owyhee on up, we had a goal of trying to keep everything at 50% FCI. So if you start looking at those numbers, many of those are above that 15% FCI, which is a standard healthy building. So currently we have several buildings that are in a high amount of need continuously. The second column is the educational adequacy. And what we did here is we came with a standard of what physical things needed to be in our classrooms. What did our buildings need to have in order to provide the education that we as a district want for our students? Again, red is not good in this category. Green is good, and then you have the shades in between green and red. The third column.
Sorry, Chair, educational adequacy, does that include the physical things that are in the classroom?
Only physical.
Not the curriculum or anything like that?
This is the physical.
I think that's a very important distinction to make.
Is the physical components, the chairs, the desks, the walls, the heating, the cooling, the carpet, the technology, the things that you actually have on the wall that promote the educational output of students. So these are all physically attached to the classroom. Any other questions on that? That's a great clarifier. We're just trying to say the physical components are what we are measuring here, not the curriculum. So in the third category, the utilization is a little bit different than the other two categories that we have described. Red tells us that we're not really utilizing that building. Green means we're utilizing that building to its highest capacity. For example, if you look at Nampa High, its utilization is 100% and it is green. Well, we also know that you don't want to have a building at 100% capacity. Typically, high schools, you want to have them about 80%. Elementary schools, you want to have about 85%. That is the sweet spot for utilization. So in this, when you look at this graph, again, red means we're underutilizing the buildings, and the green means we're probably utilizing them too much. So just again, as you look at this graph, we wanted to make sure that that was clear as we use it and show more information for you, how to interpret this information.
And utilize means capacity of people in the
Correct.
building.
So we have this many seats. This is how many kids should be in that building. Here's how many kids are actually in that building.
But it's not necessarily just capacity, it's how you use that capacity, really. It's like if you have 80%.
That's
capacity,
why the 80% capacity is your sweet spot.
then you've got 20
Flexibility.
students instead of 40 students or something to that effect. I mean, it's
has
how
to-
it's used.
It is. So you have to look at how you need other rooms that facilitate other activities. In an elementary,
I
you
think
need,
really quick what he's maybe trying to get at is that maybe in the utilization category, green is not always good.
correct,
Is what
100%.
I think that we're.
No, we got that.
Right.
When
Yeah.
you said 80% is that sweet spot, the question behind that would be, why 80%?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's got to be some room for a chemistry lab or
Correct.
whatever the case might be for
Yes.
for
Special ed.
students to be able to
You have
use that.
special ed space that might be larger than what a typical
But
classroom
he
needs
had
are.
said is green is good.
No, in
No.
utilization,
In utilization, red is
red is good, green
right.
is bad.
So it's just the opposite.
It's opposite in utilization. That
Yeah.
was
No, I
the
got
point we
that.
wanted to ensure that you understood in that
Yep.
category.
Well, I would say that red is still not good.
Correct.
Well, right, but I'm saying in his
Yellow.
analogy, yellow or orange, right?
Yellow or
When he
orange
was
is
like green
good.
is good and red is bad, you're kind of like, okay, it depends on what column we're in.
Yes.
Trustees, Chair Taylor, trustees, I think the purpose of seeing this whole slide has to do with, just as I mentioned, with as our community has changed, as our enrollment has changed, since boundaries haven't been addressed, our utilization is kind of all out of whack a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you look at a portfolio of buildings, just as we did when we were trying to determine the needs for those and rebuilding those, on the physical things, we also need to look at how we're utilizing those. And what we're seeing here is some we're utilizing well, some we're maxed out. We're not hitting that sweet spot as maybe we need to.
Thank you.
That's it? Oh, sorry. I thought we had interrupted you.
There's always more, but
You
no,
just
for now that's
gave
good.
up.
You're here for the entire.
The last slide.
We'll have more.
Is another interesting slide that just talks again around that, how do our boundaries feed into our schools. It's not the most easy thing to read and see, but this shows our current feeder patterns of elementaries that go in middles that feed into highs. And one of the keys you'll see there, kind of that last sentence, whenever possible, it is to have the same patterns and groups of students together so that students aren't split up. And I think that's historically something that we've known, that when I have friends who live across the street and they end up going to one school and I go to another school, that's hard on families, that's hard on children. And so ideally you want to make sure that there's feeder patterns that all keep students together and don't split students up. And I know historically in our district we have had that, where students have been split around. It's just kind of how it's been because we've grown so quickly, but now it might be time to look at how we do that and address it. Again, so to summarize, a purpose of just to have us again become familiar with some of these documents, I would encourage you as trustees to kind of look through them again and review them. If there's any questions, to please bring those back to us as a staff. I'm happy to answer those for you. But it hits at obviously the physical things that we discussed around the bond, but also around this part around how we utilize and how has our community changed over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Trustees, so I just want to remind everybody, and I did send out board priorities, that boundaries has been something requested really by all. And so Dr. Russell and I have talked in length about the facilities plan, our need to understand it. That's why it really is so important that we get it now and that we do each individually review it and send those questions back. This will be a very helpful tool as we navigate boundary conversations. And then the second thing I want to reiterate, because we get a lot of this, is that in order to have these conversations, we have to collect data. That data has to come from the staff. No decisions regarding this have been made. While there are suggestions and there have been conversations, and we understand that that can be scary, those final decisions do have to come back to the board, and that's how those decisions are made. So that was the other really important piece that Dr. Russell mentioned, because that has been the community chatter, the questions, or the things that we've had to discuss in our meetings. So you guys will see each week or every other week at times as I update you on those things. It's to make sure that you guys have these really useful tools in your hands so that as you navigate these, that we have time to ask questions, meet with Mr. Stauffer, take a look at one of these schools so that we have an understanding, or whatever it is that each individual trustee needs. And that's it.
Chair Taylor and trustees, one thing I would share out is if the board would like us, we could come next month, obviously with answers to some of your questions if that comes out of it, but also maybe to share what a draft kind of boundary process may look like, and that would be a big picture. Maybe some pros and cons of looking at something like that, what it might do for a district in general. But happy to do whatever the board would like us to address, and happy to do nothing as well.
Happy to do nothing.
Sorry, Chair Taylor, I want to.
No, we get it. We get it.
I want to push that.
This is why we're not friends.
I'm happy to do
just
that.
throwing that out there.
You know, if going for a bond is difficult, boundaries can be even more so difficult, and it is very difficult to go through that process because it involves every family.
Everything.
Trustee Kirkman, I was going to suggest, because that's going to be at least a 1.5 hour conversation, just like the behavioral report was. That
you did not see that coming.
No, but I have put that on my agenda setting the topics in. Is I think you need to have it as a work session.
Agreed.
So you can have more dialogue, and then it also makes it an effective means to move forward after that workshop that they could do. So it doesn't have to have a 15-minute timeline. It could have a 2-hour or multiple on just that topic. Is what I would suggest doing.
And my fellow trustees, I would echo that. We have really left time for any type of work sessions that we may need. I would agree. I think that this is going to be a topic, and I agree, like Dr. Russell said, a boundaries conversation affects every family living in our district. It doesn't, I am fully aware that people live in certain places to go to certain schools. Like, I am fully aware that this is a topic that definitely needs to be covered, discussed, considered. So I do also believe that a work session would be best for this topic, which is why I saved so many of our meeting hours so that we can schedule work sessions. Really didn't see the behavior thing coming, but I would agree.
So quick follow-up on this. So anything that comes regarding this, is this coming from the facilities committee?
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, all of this information that was in this did come from the facilities committee. They're the ones that got the input. We did do some surveys as well with our community a 1.5 to 2 years ago, looking at Mr. Stauffer, that helped guide the committee, but this was all through the facilities committee.
And anything going forward is going to come from a facilities committee, recommendations, a draft, anything like that. Either a work session or a...
Chair Taylor, Trustee Kirkman, at this point, no, nothing would come through the facilities committee at that point. I'm looking at Mr. Stauffer, but we have the recommendations now. What I would see, it would come through the board, if the board would like to direct us that way. Administration could bring some things through about how that process might look, pros and cons of it, benefits of that, but it ultimately be, I think, through the board.
Maybe, may I suggest, fellow trustees, that a work session would be the best place for us to even come up with those asks?
Well, I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I second that one.
There was no motion, but if we have no...
Only because she can't make one.
Yeah, only because I can't make one. So, and it's not even an action item.
Yeah.
So trustees, do we have any other questions right now in regards to the facilities plan?
No, I think we are 10 years behind at least on this conversation, and so I would like to get a work session, not a special meeting, a work session on the books as soon as possible. And then, whatever this process looks like to set that up. But I think those communicating about this and communicating often and as much as we can, even though no decisions, again, I like that you said that, even though no decisions have been made. But yeah, I mean, I'm ready to cannonball into the boundary conversation because I think we're behind.
And it was on our board priorities,
Yeah.
and both you and Trustee Kirkman in open meeting had requested for a boundaries conversation. So it really is just a conversation, but it is in our board priorities. So I see the work session coming very soon. Okay. All right, if we're all good. Anything else, Trustee Kirkman?
Nope.
Okay, we are going to move to enrollment report. And can somebody make sure we still have Trustee Pearson, right?
Yes, and her we did ask her to shut her camera off due to connectivity.
Okay, I see her.
Just
Okay,
not,
got
but we
you.
have
Just
her
making
on.
sure. Okay, good.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, Dr. Russell, enrollment report?
Yeah, Chair Taylor, trustees, before you is the enrollment report. I'm happy to answer any questions similar to, I think, what you see.
Trustees, any questions on the enrollment report? Okay, no questions? Mr. Dewey? Yeah, you should have skipped.
I don't think I have that ability anymore. All right. Do you have any questions so far before I kind of go into what I have? All right. So what we're looking at right now, we're starting. I mean, kind of been a little bit halfway through our budget process right now. One of the biggest things that's hitting us right now, the JPAC has done really well for us. I will admit that there is a good chunk of money that's coming towards us and our teachers and our spending. The main issue that hit us this year was that they are bringing us back to ADA instead of enrollment. What we're looking at, we haven't got a good number yet from the state, but it could be as much as $5.5 million of decline, even though they've given us new money. And it's really going down from about 667 where we are right now, could be as low as 620, 615. If you look at some of the stuff with for protection, it could be even low as 607. We don't think it's going to be that much.
Chair Taylor, just to clarify what he's talking about is units, which
Units.
is how we earn revenue.
Yep.
Just wanna make sure.
So one of the things we're grappling with right now is how is this a 1-year thing? Literally a week before JFAC was to hear our budget, the JFAC chair pulled out a new funding formula that changed everything and the way it looked on everything. Did not get a hearing. It's not going forward. But we're wondering is if that's going to be something they're going to do next year or not. So is this a 1-year thing, or do we have to gradually bring things down? Do we need to use ESSER to kind of make things kind of whole for a little while? That's kind of the stuff we've been dealing with right now. A couple of the good things that are out there, though, they did put a lot of money into the teachers again. Now the question is we don't know how it is because there's a $6,300 that's supposed to go on the career ladder. However, they have not changed the statutory requirements of this career ladder. So they keep telling us, hey, it's going to be on the career ladder. It's going to be on the career ladder. Go ahead and put that into your negotiations. Put that into your contracts. Yeah, but there's no statutory change. So it's one of those, we don't want to be the low level and all of a sudden be at 41,000 when everybody else is at 48 on their very first teachers. We would get annihilated. So that's one thing we're working through right now. Hopefully we'll get that answer here in the next week or so. Apparently there is a trailer bill out there, I guess, but I haven't seen it yet. And then the other thing that they really did as well is they gave us a 4% increase on our classified, and they also added an additional $97 million to the pot, which is a very substantial part for our classified folk, and that's a great thing. So we did some of those adjustments already. I mean, remember the last few years we've been trying to do some of those adjustments. So some of that is just a backstop of what I knew we couldn't pay for unless they did this anyway. But I still think there's a good opportunity to get the people that need to be paid. So, so those professional, paraprofessionals that are working in our special ed, they need to be paid more than 14 or 15 bucks an hour to start, honestly. So we agree with that, and it's a wonderful thing for us, and we're going to try to push that to the limit and utilize all that money for our classified where we can. So.
Trustees, just an update, just because there is a lot of changing in funding. I don't know that everybody, when they come through the door as a trustee, understands JFAC, what it is. I sure didn't.
Yeah.
So I have been putting some updates in our trustee updates, and also want to remind you guys that this will be coming back to us as a work session, because the difficult part in learning about funding is that if we're already higher than what the threshold was, then some of that money is already spoken for. So our hope in working with Dr. Russell is that we just get better at understanding the fiscal changes that we go through as a district, because we are somewhat funded on the back end. So we will be working with Mr. Dewey not only to work out work sessions, but also maybe a list of more frequently asked questions, terms to familiarize yourself with. When I say we're working on, Chrissy and I are working on, but the goal of that is just to help for more of those budget workshops to be easier to understand and more palatable. And then I did suggest, which I think is helpful even now, if you've had some one-on-ones with Mr. Dewey, it may be helpful, because we are again changing from from enrollment to average daily attendance. The additions of funds, but as Mr. Dewey is talking about, what does that mean that we're backfilling on the end, or things that we've already done when the money wasn't there, the loss of ESSER funds after next year. So a lot of these things that he has been bringing to us each board meeting, we will now take and put into a work session. So just so everybody's on the same page, and those updated emails will come through as well again. But that's where we're at in the process of making sure we have time to discuss and give you all of the platform that you need for hours.
Yeah, it's a riveting conversation about budget.
Oh, yes, Trustee Pearson, please.
Just a quick question out of curiosity. Mr. Dewey, on this enrollment formula versus the ADA formula, have you ever used the enrollment formula before the COVID, or is this something new? And if so, how did you deal with it then? Is the enrollment?
So, Trustee Pearson, let me go back a few years. So we had been on ADA funding for many years. When COVID happened, a couple different things happened to us. The first year that it happened, we had a bunch of students leave and went to online schools, which then created a big reduction in the number of units out there, and then protection was getting messed up, and so the school board did a temporary rule to make it up to enrollment, which then brought everybody kind of back up to where we needed to be. And then we went enrollment one more year for that. The difficulty is we have right now is ADA sounds great. However, our kids aren't coming the same as that they used to be. Where we used to be 98, 97% in our elementary. Some of are as low as what? Some days in the 80s.
Yeah, upper 80s.
Yeah, and which was normally not ever called for. So the problem is the dynamics of kids coming now is much less than what's happened in the past. Therefore, even though we normally, if it was the normal times, we would have been okay. It wouldn't have been that big of a difference, but it truly is a big difference for our district, where our average daily attendance in relationship to enrollment is quite a bit less than it ever had been prior to the pandemic.
Okay, so ADA isn't efficient now because the enrollments are different than they used to be in the past.
I would venture to say ADA was never efficient. So the frustration we've always had with ADA is that we still have to staff our schools based on enrollment, and we have a teacher that has 30 kids, even though 25 show up. We still have to staff that we have to have 30 desks available. So we've been harping on enrollment for quite a long time, even before I was here. So ADA is, they believe ADA is something that helps us get the kids in, and it makes us get those kids in. And I don't think that. I think the dynamics have definitely changed, especially since after COVID. That just isn't happening. The one thing we will be looking at, though, is what can we consider is enrollment. ADA, because we do have the ability with our devices that kids can get on in that, and they had to make those choices during COVID, and we're going to pursue that as much as possible and say, hey, if kids gets on, do I get to count that? So we're going to look into some of that as well, just to try to see what we can do.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's it.
So other than that, they gave us some more tech funding.
Thanks, Steve.
Trustees, any other questions for Mr. Dewey?
I got a kind of a weird side question that kind of goes along with what you were talking about. It's probably for Dr. Russell. When we talk about the decrease in numbers of students, have you heard anything about the increase or decrease of number of students attending charter schools?
Trustee Chair Taylor, Trustee by charter schools have grown, and but they have grown just because the state of Idaho has allocated more charter schools throughout the years. And they do have cap limits, so not every student who wants to go to a charter school can go to a charter school. But yes, they have grown. I guess if that's kind of the simple question you're asking, they have grown throughout the state, mostly because they have provided more resources and funds in each. I think there's 4 to 5 that open a year around the state.
But I'm talking more around
We, Chair Taylor and Trustee Valle, we have had more charter schools. That's one thing I didn't mention in the facilities report. We had one that opened last year. We had one that opened, 2017 or 18.
So we had
Gen Prep open.
Gen Prep and then expansion.
And then Pathways opened in 2016.
Pathways is.
And then we've had Idaho Arts for a lot of years, but then we had Legacy.
And they expanded at the same time that Gen Prep.
Idaho Arts has expanded, so they have grown. Yes.
That's a large part. So Gen Prep and Idaho Arts expansion was a lot of our kids. But the frustration I guess I have with that is, and it's similar to a lot of the education savings accounts that we're hearing right now that they're really trying to push, is what typically happens in those environments is the people who are engaged, the parents that are engaged, are the ones to get on the list, to get onto those. They don't take our most neediest kids. They don't take our special education. They don't take any of those kids. Many of the kids that act out or have the behavior problems that we have tend to come back to us. So those are the kids that we get to have the pleasure of educating while the charters maintain their great grades and great kids that have parents that care to get them into those programs. So although I think there are some great people and great things happening in charter schools, I think we tend to see some of those people come back to us, then the charter school is not allowed to stay in there, which is a frustrating thing, which then costs us more money. You've heard it with everything else we're doing. So we have the most expensive children to educate, in my opinion, which makes it difficult if we're all on the same playing field with money.
Trustees, any other questions for Mr. Dewey? Trustee Pearson? You guys, any additional questions from Trustee Pearson? Sorry, I can only see you now. Tracy, are you good on questions? Okay, good. Okay. All right, so we are, Mr. Dewey, thank you. We are going to move on now to the superintendent report.
Madam Chair, trustees, before you tonight, we wanted to share around our graduation rate. I'm going to have Ms. Christensen Coons come and present some data around that. We did discuss a lot around graduation. This is something that at least myself as superintendent would like to look and try to address, set some goals around. And as we talk around more goals, I think that'd be something that I would like to have that conversation with. She'll share some of the complexities around that, but it does affect everyone in our secondary schools. I mean, that's ultimately our ultimate goal. And we have dropped, we'll share that data. I believe we can get back to where we were despite some of the difficulties that we're seeing in our schools that we shared. But I also think we can improve as well. I think we need to strive for that improvement. There are other school districts that also have difficult students that are showing growth. I think we can show growth as well. But anyhow, just want Mr. Christensen Coons to share some information with you today.
Trustees, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in front of you again this evening. I know Tyler is pulling up the presentation for us. You may remember when we talked about the continuous improvement plan back in September, that I gave you fair warning there was a really good chance we would not see an increase in our graduation rate, because we're still kind of, when we look at that 4-year cohort model, some of the effects of our time out during COVID. We had a number of students who didn't choose to return to our campuses because they were working full time, and so we knew that would be part of this picture. And so we did see that decrease of 1.7% from 2021 to the cohort 2022. And as we look at that, we also saw that the state had a slight decrease. They just had 0.2% though. And so I think this picture just kind of helps us see that across the state we did see a small drop, but here in Nampa we did see a greater drop. On the next page, you can kind of see on the left-hand side of each of those sections, you can see the Nampa School District trend from 2018-19 through 21-2022 compared to the state trends. And so we see that the state kept a little more level with their all students graduation rate compared to how Nampa School District did. And then we also see that we're actually trending back up in our Hispanic or Latino, back up to where we were pre-COVID, so we're headed in the right direction there. But the state also saw that increase from the year before. And then I'd also encourage you to check out that limited English proficiency. I'm pretty excited about the growth that we made from that 2021 cohort to 2022 cohort. And we saw greater growth than the state did, even though we're still not quite back where we would like to be in that area. And then we made a very small increase at our economically disadvantaged, and so we still have some work to do in those subgroups. Just in case you wanted to see Nampa a little closer, on the next slide, I kind of blew it up for you so you could see just the trend for Nampa in those areas. And you can kind of see, just as I shared on the previous slide, there are some moments that we've made some great gains, like in our LEP and our Hispanic or Latino population, but again, not as much of a growth as in our economically disadvantaged as we'd hoped to see. I know I display this data in a billion different ways to try to help you understand it. So there's the next one that compares us to the state, but I won't take you too deep into that this evening unless you would like to. One of the requests this board made, Chair Taylor, you actually made this request, and I said, I could do that as long as we're comfortable with some squishy data. And you said very kindly to me that you would take my squishy data. So the next 2 slides are my attempt to really look at those students who didn't graduate. So we call them those non-graduates, right? As we think about it this year, we had 806 graduates in that 2022 cohort out of 1,067 students that were counted in our cohort. So this next slide is my attempt to start giving you a little more information about those 261 kids. And
thank you, Anita.
You're welcome. I hope it's, I may have given it to you in 3 different displays because I wasn't sure which part of it was most interesting to you or what you would like to see. But what we see is we had 7 students that went to homeschool, especially during that COVID timeframe, and we were unable to get the documentation from that parent that they moved to homeschool. And so they counted against us as non-graduates. We had 10 students go to Job Corps. Job Corps up until the last year has not had the opportunity to, that you could only do a GED through Job Corps, which means that you count as a non-graduate. They actually have a high school track now, but many of our kids didn't enter into that high school track because it's a newer thing being able for kids to do. Transferred out of state, and we could not collect that record. It was 13 of those kids. It wasn't from a lack of sending a million messages and doing everything we could, but we couldn't track down out of state transfer information. We had 17 students that was a records request from another Idaho public school, but they, while we sent the records to them, the student never actually enrolled and attended a day. And so I can't tell you what happened with those 17 kids, but we tried to follow up. And sometimes we even will get a records request at that school, right? And so we may be out of state. And so sometimes those are kids that also continued their education out of state, but we weren't able to collect that data. We had 24 students who were actually labeled as a dropout. That was the category that registrars did because the student chose not to complete their education and said they were dropping out and not planning to go into a GED program. They were just done with our school setting. Those 32 adaptive graduates, I really want to Mr. Coffey's statement earlier in the meeting, he talked about those adaptive graduates. These are kids that met the requirements of their IEP for graduation, but unfortunately in the state's eyes, because it's adaptive and isn't the state criteria for graduation, and while we handed them a diploma, they don't count as a graduate for our district. And so that was 32 of those 261 kids. And then we had 39 students who returned for a 5th year on our campuses. So they're in school right now or finishing up their high school requirements. Or they went to another Idaho public school for a 5th year. So we were able to track both those sets of kids. We had 52 kids tell us they were going to leave and go and get their GED. And then this last group, I kind of clumped them together, but they transferred out due to lack of attendance or unknown. So they didn't state that they were dropping out, but from all of our attempts to connect back with those kids and those families, they stopped attending, or we don't know what happened to them. We couldn't get them to communicate with us to explain what choice they were making instead of continuing in our public school setting. So I hope that's kind of where you were. Okay,
really
good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just in case you wanted it in a different display, the next slide is just so you can see the percentage. I wasn't sure what you were looking for, but this is my way to give some finite information to some really squishy data, because there's always a chance that one of these kids ended up dropping out but didn't ever tell the school. So just know this is just the last information our registrars received on these kids, or counselors were entered into the computer system. And then this might have been more of a curiosity for me than for you, so apologize if this was not necessary. I really wanted to look to see what year in that 4-year cohort those kids were stepping out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For any variety of reasons. And so this is just the number of kids based off their freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. And of course, for a return for 5th year or adaptive graduates, always going to be their last year, their senior year. But those other ones kind of give you that number and display over that 4-year cohort. And I was just more curious to see that impact of COVID, if we saw greater hits of that during any one of those chunks or times in there. So that's what that data is. I didn't know if it was helpful, but hopefully it answered your burning questions about the kids that were non-graduates.
Anita, you just proved why data is so important.
I tried to make that short and sweet. I'm glad to go back to any of the other slides, but it was just one of those items for our continuous improvement plan. The state was a little late getting their data out released this year due to a district choosing not to participate in a 4-year cohort appeals process. And so we just recently got that information. So thank you for letting us slide this in here so you could see it. I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
Trustees, any question for Mrs. Christensen? No. Trustee Pearson, any questions for Mrs. Christensen?
So, yeah, if you don't mind, Chairman.
Of course, Trustee Valle.
The transfer out, lack of attendance, sorry, I didn't bring my glasses.
No, that's okay. You said it exactly correct.
Is that where the migrant students are located, the ones that move in and out that are trying?
It could possibly. I will say our migrant program does such a great job of tracking those families down that they're often not included in this group. It is truly kids who just one day decide to stop attending school, and some of them are ones that are just heart-wrenching because they're totally on track to graduate, and one day they just decide they're not gonna, and they don't come to school for 10 consecutive days, and school's done everything they can to try to reach out and contact, and we're not able to gather the why. We're not able to track down. So they that lack of attendance or just unknown, right? They just stopped attending and no parent understood or was able to explain why their kid wasn't continuing, or the student themselves we weren't able to reach.
I think we're done. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
And congratulations on taking that baby.
Chair Taylor, trustees, our last update, Mr. Stocker is going to come and share some information around our ADU contract.
This is just a follow-up. Last board meeting we had discussed and venturing in with ABM to look at extending our contract out for a year. We are working on that process right now. We'd like to incorporate that potentially in a special meeting we have with some other operational things things that I've been talking with Ms. Lamont about as well. But we have been working on that collectively, and I just want to make sure that we brought that in front of you again, that we will have a resolution for you.
Trustees, any questions for Mr. Stoffer regarding this contract? And in case anybody needs clarity, it's the janitorial. No? Okay, perfect. Dr. Russell, if that's everything for your report, then if we have any possible agenda items.
Wait, is there anything on the nutritional services contract that was on the agenda?
Where? Sorry.
I can speak to it quickly.
Graduation rate, nutrition service contract update.
That's what it was. Chair Taylor,
Oh,
just my
sorry,
apologies.
see
I got ABM and nutrition services.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Good. Trustee Taylor, Madam Chairman Taylor and Board of Trustees, the Food Nutrition Services has contracts that were potentially going to be coming up for renewal this year. But with the clauses that we do have, they were more in favor for the district to use those clauses, which would keep prices the same, instead of having to renegotiate those prices at potentially higher levels at this point in time. So the district, the food services, used the clause and opt into the contract so that we could maintain our balances on purchasing food from 3 different vendors. So that was just more of an update that did take place. It was part of the initial contract that we could update for up to 3 years, or we could opt out and renegotiate. It was in our benefit to choose to opt into those 3 contracts, so that we did do that.
So this is the first year of a 3-year?
Correct. This was year 1. We were completing year 1. So in our favor, that it is very much in our benefit for the next few years, considering the amount of prices have gone up in that industry. So we have kept those status quo for this next upcoming year.
That actually sounds too good to be true with $5 eggs.
I know, doesn't it?
It does.
So yeah, we were able to do that, and hopefully the vendors did honor that as well. So we're excited for their
So they have the
participation.
option on their end to not.
There's a part of the clause where they can come back and show how prices have gone up, and then it basically opens up another layer of discussion that's in our contract. It's pretty extensive to keep our costs as fixed as possible, but they have honored those at this point in time as well.
Trustees, any questions regarding the nutrition services contract? Okay, then we will move to future or possible agenda items. Awesome. Can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me? Hello? Okay, sorry, it's getting kind of loud in here. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we can put on the agenda the back to school guidelines that I discussed earlier. Also, it seems to be that there's a lot of increase in numbers with bullying and behavioral issues. I'm wondering if maybe we could put something on the agenda or some kind of work session regarding bullying policies, maybe some implementations for, I don't know, of some things that are working, not working, and maybe we could examine some of that. I don't know how that would look, but I think that's a big issue that we're dealing with right now. Maybe we could actually look at some of the things that are working or aren't. And then lastly, maybe some kind of bathroom policy or protocols for consistency in the bathroom protocols for ensuring students physical and mental health for going to the bathroom. That's another thing I would like to maybe examine. That's it.
I'm just going to make sure because she had it on behavioral that you got all.
I did, and then I also already added a monthly review report that, as the guys said, doing that presentation.
And then I had already sent an email to you too, just to make sure that the other one was on there.
Yes.
So, okay. I'm going to write down all 3 days. I wanted to make sure you got it because
I also added the school band. I mean, I did add all the conversations
Okay.
from tonight
just
already.
making sure. Thank you, Trustee Pearson.
Thank you. I'm at a mute.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Trustees, anything else?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring something. I think it's important to bring up CRT, critical race theory, and decide if there needs to be a policy on the books with regards to not having that anywhere in our curriculum.
Okay. So because CRT, I believe, is already illegal in the state of Idaho, am I correct in that understanding? Okay, so can we figure out what that would look like? Okay, does that work
Oh,
for you?
I'm sorry, are they talking about it in the state?
No, CRT is already illegal in the state of Idaho.
Oh, okay, I wasn't aware of it.
Okay, but
It's
do you want,
I still want to explore it. because-
so you want to explore it?
I also included possible policy, but he also included curriculum, so that might fall under curriculum review as well.
Okay.
And we're gonna have our meeting, with regards to- maybe we'll talk.
We
about
will
that.
too, but we can also keep that on there because I'm trying really hard to update you guys every week on the request that we get so that you guys know when they're coming back to you, because honestly, if I left the meeting and didn't rewatch it, we talk about a lot. Okay? Trustees, anything else?
If we're gonna talk about critical race theory, can we bring a definition?
Sure.
Yes.
We'll probably address that, I would believe, in a work
I
session.
just, yeah, I mean, I just think there's a lot of definitions floating out there, and then a lot of people that, when I've asked, can't define it for me, so I just really wanna know specifically, like.
So I'm really hearing,
we,
I'm hearing curriculum work session.
Yeah.
Is really what I hear. Curriculum work session is that request. Got it. Okay, trustees, anything else?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh. I'm gonna wait, and then at the end I'll get one. No, I don't. I'm just joking. I probably shouldn't be joking.
I don't see on this list, and I don't believe it's been completed, but the book challenge process.
So the procedure on challenge books. So I have, if you look in the board packet, there is an attachment with your guys' priorities, and that was, I believe that was in there, but it's also on the main page, and it says procedure on challenge books still as well.
So I'm looking at the,
I'm on it too.
On the main page.
I don't know what the main page is. I'm looking
Oh,
at
sorry.
the,
District boundaries, possible alternatives, district mission, program review.
and I do know that staff have been
Facilities
focused on curriculum and focused on bond information and getting that out, but we got an email, I think it was from Coeur d'Alene. Coeur d'Alene School District asking about our policies.
From the ATO.
I mean, it's still floating out there, so I just wanna, I don't see it in this list though. Am I
I'm
missing
sorry,
it?
don't say, I'm
It's not in-
reading it too.
I'm sorry, it's not in the big list because that was the list of priorities that was
You mean
designed by the
itty bitty
meeting.
bitty
It's
list?
in the, if you go out of the list on the main page where the topic is. it
Oh,
is
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And Trustee Kirkman, you are correct. Someone from Coeur d'Alene did reach out to the trustees asking about that process. I don't know if all the trustees got it. I do know that Trustee Gaillet, Kirkman, and Pearson did receive an email asking for their process on that.
And I don't think it's been responded to.
But I'm wondering
I'm
if
actually
we
gathering
didn't-
information for them.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Okay. Okay. All right. Trustees, anything else? Okay.
Chair Taylor,
Yes.
the only thing I was going to let everyone know is Trustee Pearson, once you guys go into executive session after making the motion and going through the roll call, she is going to go offline. So we're going to call her on her phone.
Okay.
And so they won't see her anymore.
Okay.
Just so you're aware of that.
Okay. Got it. Okay, then at that, I will entertain a motion into executive session.
I move that we go into executive session per Idaho Code 74-206, 1B, D, and J. B, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student. D, to consider records that are exempt from disclosure as provided in Chapter 1, Title 74, Idaho Code. And J, to consider labor contract matter authorized under Section 74-206, 1A and B, Idaho Code.
Okay, I have a motion seconded. Roll call.
Who seconded?
Trustee Gaillet.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I did not hear that. Chair Taylor?
Aye.
Trustee Baying?
Aye.
Trustee Simpson?
Aye.
Trustee Kirkman?
Aye.
Trustee Pearson?
Aye. I'm gonna go off now so I
We are
can.
now in executive